Good morning, everyone. Oki, Dadanastada, Ambawastich, and Tansei, thank you for joining us on Treaty 7 territory for this public hearing. Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On the roll, Councillor Sharp.
I'm here.
Councillor Wyness. Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Chu.
Here.
Councillor Dollywall. Here. Councillor Poopins. Here. Councillor Wong. Here. Councillor Walcott.
I'm here.
Councillor Corral.
I'm here. I'm here.
Councillor Chabot.
Present.
Councillor Penner. Here. Councillor Spencer.
Here.
Councillor McLean.
Here.
Councillor DeMong.
Yep.
And Mayor Gondek.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay, so off the top, we're going to do a couple of things to people who were registered to speak, but for some reason or another weren't here. That way, everyone's got an idea of the names that have been called and not responded to. After I read this out, and I'll pause for a minute to see if any of those people are here, my recommendation would be if you were part of panels before panel 52, if you were 52 or earlier and you were unable to make it, but you are still interested in doing a presentation, please send an email to publicsubmissions@calgary.ca. So in the same way you would have originally registered, if you send an email to that address, publicsubmissions@calgary.ca, I won't have to keep reading out the names, and you will be captured and put back into the queue. I will fit you in as I can. Okay, so I'm going to read out folks from the beginning, from panel 1 up to panel 52, who were absent. And if you're here, please say here, or if you're in the audience, please put up your hand. Tyler Pubbin. Allison Farrell. Randy McCord. Marianne Clark. Michael Desolé. Tudor Dinka. Abraham Bayin. Edward Williamson. Andrew Voorhees. Erica Voorhees. Leslie Farrar. Doug McNaughton. Carl Pereira. Kristen Campbell. Heather Templeton. Ranvinder Chahal. Darlene Banfield. Gaurav Moda. Douglas Ferguson. Okay, I'm moving on to April 23rd panels now. James Logan. Dean Gardipi. Jonathan Warner. Diane Stopforth. Amit Dand. Emily Fellers Robertson. Jeffrey Hodel. Chanel Mather Shapiro. Ashley Van Dam. Adam DeVelter. Nasir Ahmed. Neil Abiyankar. Donalda McBeath. Matthew Knoll. And we are now on to panel 35, and following that, do we have David Conkin, Andrew Bitts, Michelle Dreffs, Benjamin Payet, Cece Yang, Barbara Hogan, Jasper Woodard, Mark Sainer, Nicole Zhang, Bill Woodward, Barbara Johnson, Paul Maroney, Kelly Zarnke, Gordon King, Christian Ramesh, Gail Pocock. Hi, thank you for making this worthwhile. You can come down and grab a seat. You'll be part of the first panel. And do we have Fong Jiang? Okay, so we've got Gail Pocock. We are going to go to panel 53. Do we have Scott Ritchie?
Present.
Thank you. Do we have Gregory Holtz?
Can you hear me okay? Oh.
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gregory Holtz, hi. You can grab a seat up here. Do we have Jesse Binnett? Hi. You can grab a seat up there too. And do we have David Cumming?
Yes, here.
Perfect. So our panel will start with Gail, then Scott, Gregory, Jesse, and David. So
Sorry, Mayor Gondak, I'm a lawyer. Actually, I have court at 10. If, with your indulgence, could I speak first? I won't be able to be here if I'm able to speaking last.
who is this?
Sorry, this is David Cumming.
David Cumming. From the panel, would you be okay if David goes second? No opposition to that? Okay, we're going to start with Gail, David, then we'll go to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so Ms. Pocock, please go ahead.
Am I to start now?
Yes, please, whenever you're ready.
Okay. My name is Gail Pocock. I am not representing a group or business. I live in the community of Highwood in Northwest Calgary. The majority of Calgarians do not understand blanket rezoning. Aldermen need to go out and speak to residents in every community about this issue and how it will affect them. Afterwards, the rezoning concept should be put to a public vote independent of an election. I do not support the housing strategy plan for blanket rezoning, the creation of high-density housing across Calgary, and an amendment that would remove public input on land use changes. The new housing strategy is intended to create affordable homes by increasing supply. The federal government's decision to bring 500,000 more immigrants into Canada for the next 3 years will drive up house prices. Savings from future lower interest rates will be absorbed by higher costs for goods and services, including food, gas, utilities, insurance, and property tax. Increased costs will raise rents, strain homeowners, and grow the number of people who can no longer afford their home. New homes are being built with minimal parking. Higher density means the creation of fourplexes with basement suites. That's an 8-dwelling unit on one 50-foot lot with only 0.5 parking stalls for each unit. Beside these mini apartments, you will have row houses and duplexes with basement suites. Neighbors will fight over street parking. Our city is too spread out to rely on transit or bicycles. Limiting mobility will cause problems in getting to work, shopping, leisure activities, medical appointments, and visiting friends and family. We do not want our personal freedoms and quality of life reduced. Less consumer spending will lower our gross national product, businesses will suffer losses, many will lose jobs, and living without a vehicle uses a precious commodity. It uses our time. It is statistically proven the more multi-unit dwellings in a high-density environment, the higher incidence of crime and violence. We already have a gang and drug problem on our existing LRT. Land developers are taking down all of our old evergreen trees to make room for infills. Complete lots are being taken up with housing. We have no yards for children to play or dogs to run, no gardens, no decks or patios to enjoy. Where will the birds, squirrels, and rabbits go? The lack of green spaces is going to see more people dependent on technology. Schools are now trying to sue social media because of the attention deficit problems children are having. Poor communication skills are creating problems for employers training new staff. Developers are building homes at record pace with lower cost materials. New homes do not fit into existing communities. A lack of quality in workmanship and product is apparent. Will these homes endure cold winters, temperature shifts, and be able to minimize sound travel? With multi-unit dwellings and row houses so close together in a city of high winds, I expect we'll have a very busy fire department. Rapid population growth means more cars on the roads than ever before, increasing traffic and traffic accidents. We need to build more overpasses, extend roads, and add more streetlights, roundabouts, signage, traffic lights, buses, bus shelters, bicycle lanes, and expand our LRT. Congestion, heavy traffic, limited parking, immobility, cost of living increases, and high crime will send cases of anxiety, depression, domestic violence, and suicide soaring. Rapid population growth will strain our medical staff, police, firefighters, and educators, and put more demands on our natural resources and infrastructure. New plumbing has to tie into our existing old sewer system that was never intended to support densification. Calgary's had 2 energy crises this year and another last August. Established neighbourhood transformers will use greater concentrations of power as a result of dense upzoning. The estimated cost to Calgarians is $57.5 million in one-time cost, $27 million in annual cost, and $10 million in capital costs per year going forward. This does not include other costs. Rather than blanket rezoning, I suggest creating strategic placement of community housing. Shared living will offer affordable housing with less strain on infrastructure. Reserve high density for transit-oriented development and high traffic areas as long as building exteriors are fire retardant and each home has one parking space. Developers are making substantial profits, yet they are not contributing to the infrastructure cost across our city to support densification. Property tax hikes alone cannot support these costs. I am suggesting a 15% tax to developers based on the purchase price of new homes, 10% to support city infrastructure and build community housing, 5% to support provincial development of smaller communities, and affordable housing outside Calgary. Our city needs to do some long-term urban planning instead of trying to find a solution to one problem, while in its wake it creates a myriad of others. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Let's go to David Cumming, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gondak, Council, and thank you other panel members for your indulgence in letting me jump ahead of the queue. I will have to head out right after this, so I would ask if any council members do have questions, if they could please pose them right at the end of my submissions as opposed to at the end of the panel. And again, thank you for all the time you've taken this week and will continue to take in hearing these public submissions. I am a native Calgarian. I'm a lawyer. I practice in condominium law and litigation, and I have court at 10 o'clock, and that's why I can't be there in person, and we'll have to leave right after this. I grew up in Elbow Park. I currently live in Mission, and I'm here representing myself and the organization of Strong Towns, which I joined later last year. I am in favor of the proposal. Many of the speakers have talked about how it's important not to be afraid of change. And I see this a little differently. I see this proposal as a step moving away from disruptive and fast change towards allowing more incremental and bottom-up change, to allow natural market forces and supply and demand to address some of our housing needs as opposed to rapid redevelopment in certain areas. And the guiding principle here, which I said at the initial hearing, I'll say again, is that no community should experience radical change, but no community should be exempt from change. I know there's a lot of opposition from certain members of the community, and I know certainly growing up in Oval Park and still having a lot of friends that live there, they use Marda Loop and Altador as an example. And they say, I don't want my community to turn into a Marda Loop and Altador. And they look at all the development that has happened there over the past 10, 20 years. And I sympathize. I think they're quite right in saying that change, and it hasn't been all for the bad, certainly. I think there's been positive changes, but it's been disruptive. It's been rapid. And why has that occurred? Well, if you look at the communities around there, many of them, Britannia, Alboya, Owl Park, Mount Royal, North Glenmore, they're very restricted in the type of housing you can build. It only stands to reason that if you make a certain type of housing in an area in the city where there's demand for it, only available in a small portion, well, that area that allows that sort of housing is going to experience rapid and disruptive change. And we don't want that for any community. No community should be asked to endure that sort of change. And this is why I am in favor of the proposal, because it is not, as its opponents might characterize, disruptive change. It encourages integral change. Many persons in development have already talked about how the economics of their industry dictate that there's only a very few parcels that can be redeveloped. There are natural barriers. So we will not see, there's no good reason to think we will see, rapid redevelopment in areas that were formerly R1 or R2. And again, to say that I think this council should make a step away from radical change, take a small step, though no means the only step that needs to be taken, towards integral bottom-up change. The sky will not fall. And those are my submissions. If there are any questions, please let me know.
Thank you for your presentation. I don't see any questions for you in the queue, so thanks for joining us. I will now go to Scott Ritchie, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good morning, Council. My name is Scott Ritchie. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and also commend you on the huge consultation that you guys are going through with listening to hundreds and hundreds of people. I know we're not even a quarter of the way through now for you, so I appreciate you for that. So I come to you as a car owner because it seems like so many folks are very concerned about traffic, about cars, about parking, and that's what this is about, right? About cars? Not exactly, of course. So, because when we have a city that's so spread out that people feel like they can't get around without a vehicle, then I think that's something that needs to be addressed. But of course, that's not exactly what this is about either. This is really about helping there to be time, and for people for how they get around their lives. In my life, I've had the privilege to be able to do some traveling. I visited almost every major city in Canada. I lived for a year abroad in Beijing, and I've also visited Seoul, Korea, Bangkok, Paris, London, and I've done some traveling through the United States. In the traveling that I've done, one of the things that I always find remarkable was how other cities are built, how other cities are able to get so much done in the area that they take up. When I lived in China, when I was in Beijing, I was able to bicycle almost everywhere in the city, and this is a very, very big city. And I always felt safe there on my bicycle. When I visited Paris, I was really interested in me about how they had created so many places that were walkable. People don't go to Paris because they want to see what the next turnpike is like. They go there because they want to see the culture, and they want to see, and that's attractive because you can just walk anywhere. You can walk, and if some place is too far to walk, then you can walk to the nearest subway station and take the metro to go to the next metro to where you want to go. And that's only possible because of the density that they had created. And there's a lot of people who are coming on here and talking about row houses as if they're high density, and they are not. When I stayed in the hostel in Paris, it was there was a whole hotel. Our room was on like the fifth or sixth floor of the buildings that were there in the downtown, and a lot of them are 5, 6, 7, 8 stories. But because they had that density, then they were allowed to create those walkable spaces where people could get around and people wanted to go. And that's the kind of thing where if we are always building a place for cars and we're worried about parking spaces and such, cars take up far more space than I think is people really understand. And I don't have a PhD in urban sociology, but I have eyes, and these are the things that I've been able to observe when I had those opportunities. And in terms of all that, people are so afraid of townhouses. I live in a townhouse. I live in a place that I live in a place that this zoning is supposed to be facilitated, be created more of. My kids, my 2 boys, are 3 and 5. They're the light of my life. Like all parents, I want them to have all the best that I can help provide them for. This week, we started teaching my 5-year-old how to ride a bicycle. And I want to live someplace where I don't have to worry about a truck that has a hood taller than me not noticing my child if they happen to take their bicycle, heaven forbid they take their bicycle on the street. Because when we build a city for cars, we aren't building a city for people.
Mr. Ritchie, thank you for your presentation. Your time is up, but please hang on the line in case there's questions. Let's go to Gregory Holtz, please.
Congratulations, we did it. We broke the record for the longest public hearing in the city's history. I can't imagine that I have much new to add, given that you've been listening to speakers for 3 days now. I don't know why I do this. I swear I'm a lawyer in my day job. But I'll give it a shot, right? Because after all, even if something isn't guaranteed to work, it's sometimes worth giving it a shot, right? I'm a new Calgarian, having moved here from California 2 years ago, and I come to council today, a bit like the ghost of Christmas past, with a warning. If you don't pass this, the future of our city is bleak. I've seen it. As a kid growing up in the 1990s in Southern California, I saw established homeowners win battle after battle to insulate themselves from the effects of what seemed then like a never-ending influx of newcomers. Under banners like changing the character of the neighborhood, maintaining property values, and not attracting crime. The immediate result was sprawl, congestion, and an ever-increasing commute time. What should have been a 90-minute drive to Los Angeles became a 3-hour crawl. So when it came time for me to choose a place to live, I shunned the traffic jams of Southern California for the more enlightened metropolis of the Bay Area. As it turns out, enlightenment doesn't create housing opportunity either. Demand kept rising and supply barely budged to the point where living near a job, in a van or an RV or a car, became the only option for many people. Of course, homeowners didn't like that either, so they pushed for car camping bans and overnight parking bans, which brought people experiencing homelessness out of their vehicles and onto the sidewalks, under the overpasses, and into the storefronts. By the time I left the Bay Area in 2013, I was witnessing an explosion of tent encampments, filled with people priced out of their once affordable homes. Property crime, mainly car break-ins, rose too, not because they built the housing, but because they didn't. And the diverse, radical, creative culture of the Bay Area that I loved so much, in the Castro, the Mission, Japantown, Uptown Oakland, had been replaced with a very sterilized version of gentrification. Tech bros pushing out the people that made those neighborhoods so vibrant. Our short-sighted leaders dilly-dallied for decades, prioritizing the louder voices of opposition to development, who were disproportionately older, whiter, and wealthier, to the detriment of the immigrants, the servers, the teachers, and those of us just starting out. California heeded the clarion calls of privileged voices resistant to change, and the result is not only a worsening housing crisis, but an exodus of people, in terms of people who needed housing, but also because those same privileged voices are now taking their leaders to task for the visible consequences of the very inaction they championed. Now, I know, Calgary is not California, but growing pains are not unique to this city either. Is the proposal before you a perfect solution? No, but it's also not the boogeyman many speakers make it out to be. As the developer panel on Monday explained, redevelopment isn't feasible for much of the city's housing stock, so the change will be gradual and incremental. In any event, buying a home does not create a right to tell your neighbor what to do on their lot, nor does buying a home create a contract with the city that nothing will change. Neighbors and change are part of living in a city. If anything, this proposal doesn't go far enough. It's the floor, not the ceiling. As speakers before me have said, to meet this moment, we need a yes-and approach. This proposal leaves out a lot. After leaving the Bay Area for far northern California, I spent 9 years at an organization that advocated for inclusionary zoning at the expense of common sense solutions like the one before you today, or this week, or next week. In the meantime, the affordability and homelessness crises only increased following me north. Come to think of it, maybe it's me, maybe I'm the problem. The lesson I learned is not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Failing to plan for growth creates tears at the seams of society, tears that threaten to rip apart what makes Calgary so great, its people. I was fortunate enough to get in on the homeownership merry-go-round when I moved here, and it would be easy for me, like so many before me, to advocate for pulling up the drawbridge behind me, to join Club We've Got Ours. But I've learned that pulling up the drawbridge doesn't wall off the city, and that change comes whether you plan for it or not. Growth isn't the problem. Immigration isn't the problem. Blanket single-family zoning is the problem. Don't let what's happened everywhere else I've lived happen here. Plan for the future, spread the growing pains equitably, and pass this very modest zoning reform. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Jesse Bennett, please.
Originally, I curated a speech entirely in favor of blanket rezoning. However, I see there are some valid points that the opposition makes. I think I can safely say that most of the people here, whether in favor or in opposition of this motion, can agree that there is a housing crisis. Access to secure housing should not be considered a luxury. Secure housing is fundamental to the health of our people and the social and economic development of our community. Science and health studies can tell us that the 14 determinants of health are intersectional. The implications of this issue go far beyond just public housing. It is known that financial health is directly linked to physical health, social health, employment outcomes, healthy child development, adverse childhood experiences, access to healthcare, and quality education. Population growth is not something new to Calgary, and the subsequent housing developments required by population growth is not unique to this city. Additionally, the issue of homelessness affects some of the most vulnerable people in our city. People facing homelessness are vulnerable to the risk of exposure to dangerously frigid temperatures, an increased risk of deadly opioid addiction, an increased risk of exposure to violence, and higher rates of mortality. In 2023, more than 400 homeless people died in the streets of Calgary. By addressing the issue of housing poverty, we can ensure Calgarians have the opportunity to live in safety and dignity and improve the safety of our community. The idea of blanket rezoning at first sounds like a promising solution to this problem, but this might be an oversimplified solution to a complex problem. The issue of housing scarcity has been in the making for a long time, and there are several reasons for this. Interprovincial migration, foreign investment, and short-term rentals are just a few contributing factors. Firstly, the housing crisis is a national issue, and this requires multi-level government involvement of the provincial and federal government. Last year, Alberta set a year-over-year record for annual net interprovincial population growth. A driving factor for many people moving here from BC or Ontario is the cost of housing in those provinces as well. Without a nationwide solution to this housing crisis, interprovincial migration will continue to contribute to the inflation of housing prices. Furthermore, new construction builds could take years to prepare, and there is an immediate need to address the housing problem. Although thoughtful rezoning of some areas of Calgary may offer some relief, there is limited opportunity for thoughtful city infrastructure planning to ensure the preservation of the quality of life within those communities. Furthermore, international investment purchases of real estate has driven up the cost of housing in recent years. In 2023, there was a temporary ban placed on temporary real estate investments, but this ban is set to be lifted in 2027, opening up the housing market to further inflation due to foreign real estate investment by the time new construction is completed. The influx of short-term rental listings on platforms such as Airbnb account for 1.4% of Canada's overall housing stock, or 4.9% of Canada's available rental stock. Cities with short-term rental properties are seeing a greater increase in the cost of long-term rentals, rising cost of home prices, and lower long-term rental vacancies. So what are some solutions? Firstly, the housing crisis as a national issue requires multi-level intervention. Addressing the issue on a provincial and federal level across Canada is necessary to address the issue of interprovincial migration. Furthermore, there needs to be longer-term solutions to the impact that foreign investment has had on the housing market. There also needs to be policies in place to address the impact that short-term rentals are having on the housing supply and the availability of long-term rental vacancies. Lastly, with office spaces having a 30% vacancy rate in Canada, there is an opportunity to convert underused office spaces into residential housing. I think using a portion of this space towards social housing could help those at high risk of housing insecurity. If we are working to address these other issues, then I do think that some rezoning could be beneficial to address the housing crisis and to address the population growth of our city and affordability issues. However, I can see how blanket rezoning can be very short-sighted. I believe that having access to affordable housing will benefit the greater community. It is necessary to address the cost of living, which disproportionately affects the most vulnerable. It would help promote the healthy development of children within our city. It will help to address homelessness and affordability issues for the growing aging population with limited financial resources. Over the course of preparing this speech, I have learned a lot. I've challenged my own beliefs, and I realize there is no perfect way to approach this issue. I hope that my ever-evolving perspective has offered some value to this issue, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We are going to go to questions of this panel, starting with Councillor Chabot, please.
Thank you. Start with Ms. Pocock. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. Ms. Pocock, you indicated that you, which community you lived in, but I'm just curious as to whether or not you received a letter from the City of Calgary saying
Yes, I did.
that your property and a neighboring property are about to be rezoned. So,
There's development going around all over my street.
so you did receive a letter from the city?
Yes, I did.
Okay, that's the only question I had for you. Same question for Mr. Ritchie. Mr. Ritchie? Same question.
Hello?
Did you receive a letter from the City of Calgary saying your property was about to be rezoned?
No, I live in a townhouse community. I'm actually on the condo board here.
Okay, thanks. That's the
So
only question
my community was built in around 1980, 1981.
Thanks. That's the only question I had for you. Ms. Bennett, thank you. Great submission, lots of good input. Curious, did you receive a letter from the City of Calgary saying your property is about to be rezoned?
Not that I'm aware of. I have no knowledge of reason. I have no knowledge of rezoning occurring in my area.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions I had for this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Spencer, please.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for Mr. Holtz. Mr. Holtz, thank you for being here. I found particularly powerful that you have lived experience of witnessing this in other places. So I've a lot of the things that you articulated is why I find myself leaning in support of this. I'm curious when you talk about the ways in which we could be doing more. When you think about the conversation that you've had with people that obviously it comes to us differently when you're living it. I'm curious if you had anything more you could pull out in terms of if we were to be doing more, what would that more look like here in terms of connecting it back to your past experiences?
Sure, thank you. So I think because I did spend so much time representing, people without a voice, I think the thing that we could do more is that inclusionary zoning, transit-oriented development. Right? I think blanket rezoning is, like I said, the floor, not the ceiling. That's the start, but also let's build higher near transit and let's create affordability mechanisms. I kind of learned a lot about how those work in California. I don't have that experience here, so I can't speak to it, but making sure there are subsidies for people who can't afford things is just one way, but it can't be at the exclusion of other ways. I think that was short-sighted on our part for blocking some. I think we blocked transit-oriented development, and by we I mean kind of, our special interest group at the legislature, because we said that didn't have enough affordability. But at the end of the day, I think that was mistaken. I think we need all of the solutions because right now you can see what's happening with California. Trying to find the perfect solution didn't work, and it's a huge crisis now. Like, we're at the beginning of what's happened there, and I really don't want to see it happen here. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that wisdom here today. I appreciate that. And then thank you for articulating that not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. You did a great job of connecting some dots today. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I didn't cry during your question, so.
Yeah, back.
Thanks.
We have one more question from Councillor Putmans.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Holtz again, please.
Try to make me cry, huh?
Particularly interested in your experience in other jurisdictions. What do you do with the preoccupation people have with what the worries are? They're including risk to their property, neighbors, things of that nature. How do you, what in your experience has worked in terms of convincing people there is a better way?
That's a hard question because I wasn't really in the business of convincing people. I was in the business of forcing people. And I think that that's really a job of our elected representatives. I think one way here is to talk about how gradual this is. It's not your property that's going to change because it's going to be so gradual and incremental. It's going to be my property. I mean, I live in, a 60s bungalow in Forest Lawn. Like, that's prime for the type of redevelopment that panel was talking about on Monday, because it's aging, because it's very close to transit. It's going to be me. It's really not going to be the people whose houses were built in the 80s in Bankview or wherever else. I don't know enough about the city, again, to kind of go through the so many neighborhoods we have. But I think trying to convince people that this is really smaller scale than we're thinking, that it really, the blue sky city, the sky's not falling, it's going to happen over time. And the other is the risk. If we don't do something about it now, what's happening down in California and in other parts of the United States will happen here. Because if you don't start making change now, the change has to be more drastic later. And then it does have to be high rises wherever anyone wants, right? In California, they had to put into the law something called the builder's remedy, where if jurisdictions didn't do enough to plan for housing, builders could go in and do anything they wanted. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but that's what's happening. So, it's the carrot and the stick. And I think the carrot is, hey, if we do this, then we won't have to do harder things later. Maybe that's the carrot and the stick. But I also think it's looking at whose voices are represented. And, I do have empathy for the property owners who do have an investment in their property. But there's got to be some empathy about the people who aren't going to be able to get in on that ladder. I mean, I couldn't afford to buy a house in 2022. So I think trying to help our neighbors have empathy for the people who also want what they got. They just got in at kind of a more fortunate time, and circumstances have changed. So we've got to make room for everyone so everyone can kind of live that dream.
Terrific answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Winus, please.
Thanks, Mr. Holt. Stay, please. I know. You brought in an interesting piece of the puzzle, and I think you are showing that this is a problem in Western society of a housing imbalance and an unaffordable city. Now, given California did pass a law to do upzoning, which allowed a secondary unit, and the 2023 study out of UC Berkeley showed that this kind of action really didn't result in the outcomes. Like, it's almost that the sky isn't falling. It proves even if you blanket zone, you don't get the housing units, which I think is driving it, why people are kind of challenged by, will we actually get the action? So when you see studies following blanket zoning, not getting the housing units, do you really think we should continue down this path when what we promise and what we deliver are two different things?
Sure, and unfortunately I am familiar with kind of the ADU law, and I would just say that's not enough, and that's much smaller in scale than what's before you now. The problem with the ADUs, what we called affordability by design, was that it was super optional, and it was super kind of familial. People who had aging family or had kids, they'd put in an ADU, but not anyone else. And so in a way, it didn't incentivize the market enough. And so I think this proposal does incentivize the market because developers, look, I used to kind of fight with developers, right? I mean, a little too personal maybe, but my dad got kicked off the planning commission where I was growing up because he advocated for smaller lot sizes in the 90s, right? Super small change. But it could fit more single family homes on the street. No, we can't have that. I would fight with developers because I saw them as kind of money hungry and everything else. But at the end of the day, we need market solutions too. And the problem with just having ADUs is it doesn't incentivize developers to go in and and do what the market says should be done, which is tear down my bungalow and build something with 8 units, whereas an ADU would only result in 2.
Well, and that's, again, another challenge of we're looking at labeling the map one thing, but we're forgetting the financing metrics. And I think we could have made that same assumption that developers were walking away with their pockets loaded in when interest rates were closer to 0. But now as interest rates climb, we have a different equation of how do you get the built form when a label doesn't get you the built form when other metrics are at play. So again, that's I think where council finds itself, and like what can we take away from California when ultimately they're showing that this decision won't get us the housing units.
Again, I think it's do more, right? This is more than what California did. Just saying 1 extra unit on your property wasn't enough to get there. Saying we can come in and make 8 units on this parcel of land as long as it meets design standards, that is a bigger change. That is more of an incentive.
It's not, but it's still not given the financing variables. So you're still doing the same action of upzoning and giving that potential, but we're still not giving that financial incentive to get that built form, because if it's supposed to incentivize smaller builders, coming up with 2 to 3 times more capital to get this still doesn't get you there in the inflationary challenges we're facing in housing right now.
Sure, and I mean, you know, like I said, I'm not an expert kind of in the financing mechanisms, but I think my response would just be it's yes and. So the start is to take away the rules that say you can't do it and to make it a little easier for people to get through the permitting process. But also, we should figure out some financing mechanisms, right? And that starts getting into, you know, working with the provincial government and the federal, like I can't speak to that stuff. But I can say that like just laying the groundwork is this part. And if we don't do this part, that other stuff kind of can't follow, in my opinion.
Great, thank you. Like I'd love to have a longer conversation with you because this is such a complex problem council is trying to address, and thank you for your responses.
I'd welcome that opportunity. I'd learn a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions for this panel, so thank you all for joining us today. If you're on the phone line, you can hang up and follow on the live feed now. We are moving into panel 54, and before we start with the panel, there is something that needs to be clarified from legal, but let's at least get the panel assembled. This is panel 54. So Maria Virginia Castillo-Toro.
Present over the phone. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. What about Cam Kernahan?
Yeah, I'm on the phone.
Perfect, thank you. How about David Locke? John Chandler? Hi, you can grab a seat up front, sir. And what about Spencer Howard?
Yes, I'm here, Mayor.
Perfect, thank you. We will proceed with this panel of 4 in just one moment. And just so everyone's aware of the order, it'll be Maria, then Cam, then John, then Spencer. But let's hang on for just a minute. Ms. O, would you like to go ahead? There's some clarification that's needed around a public post about what this hearing is about.
Sure. This public hearing is about amending the land use bylaw and changing the land use designations of a number of parcels, and that is what is before council. Amending the land uses of several parcels at once is something that has occurred from time to time, and that is what's happening now.
Thank you for that. The reason that we're getting this clarification today, council, is because in our discussions and questions of presenters, there's been some vernacular used that says this is a public hearing about eliminating public hearings. That has caused a lot of confusion amongst the public. There has been feedback about what is this public hearing actually about. That's the clarification from legal about what this public hearing is about. So thank you. With that, let's carry on with the panel. Maria Virginia Castillo-Toro, please go ahead.
Okay, good morning. I'm Maria Virginia Castillo-Toro. I'm a resident of Altoona. I'm joining this session to express my opposition to the blanket rezoning. In the past, I have participated to individual RCG applications for single to multi-unit application in Altoona. And based on this experience and the council's position, I don't have too much hope in this engagement. However, I don't want to miss the opportunity to leave record of my opinion and exercise my freedom of speech. Right that I lose in my natal country when communists destroy everything that faulty democracy built. I bring questions that the council need to answer about the consequence of this rezoning across the city. First, Property taxes projection in the long term. Will the dividend contribution decrease in communities where the densification will occur? Second, compensation of patrimony losses for existing homeowners that invested under the past previous land designation. Third, future investment in public infrastructure, roads, service like a transit, health, education, and amenity like a recreational centers. And quite important, evacuation emergency routes. Where the property tax collection will increase, are those extra income will be reflected on upgrade or better service rather than saturation? Or does the city have already in plan to be engaged with the province and federal government to support this urban planning densification? Fourth, concerns about the lack of parking space, loss of canopy, green space, changes the community character, building heights, and privacy has always been presented in front of the council, but there's minimal engagement to address them in the existing community. 5, community heritage is always viewed as future pricing in local events. But when citizens spread their impact of the aggressive densification of neighborhood legacy, the need to ask for affordability or middle missing housing always prevails. A vivid example can be witnessed in Margalu along the 33rd Avenue, with legacy resides just in picture and strict signals. 6, city cannot dictate if a new construction will be for rental or ownership. And following the presentation made before, like Block 30 and 40, data was driven that demonstrates the supply will be driven by the builder rate return, rather than misuse affordability or missing middle housing concept shared by the city consultation. 7, does the city have enough qualified builders in town, or the rezone redevelopment will be to the mercy of investors escaping from Vancouver and Toronto? To the citizens participating in this audience, individual applications don't solve the resolving problem. By the time that the planning committee approves a land designation, the concerns raised by the neighborhood are not addressed because the public consultation is done by the developer, and this is just a bureaucratic check mark. And the stakeholder engagement is not audited by the City of Calgary. I have a vivid example of an application made in 2022 where 6 neighbors opposed to the development in the corner of 20th Street and 43rd Avenue, but the city has already approved that building with 8 units with only 4 parking stalls. This outcome will be very difficult, very different if one application is made by a resident trying to have a second rental. And like the August story, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Like previous participants, I'm totally opposed to be coercing by funding offered by the federal government, which Trudeau's administration uses our tax contribution against us by imposing their agenda in our well-being and willpower. Finally, if rezoning is approved, what would be the value of keeping words of division to solve problems? Why don't we solve every problem in Calgary by a blanket policy? Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Cam Kernahan, please.
Yes, good morning. My name is Cam Kernahan, and I'm a born and raised Calgarian that loves this city. When my wife and I were looking for our first family home, we spent many months and looked at well over 100 homes across Calgary. We had some criteria, including great access to parks and schools, mature streetscapes, close to downtown, and room for a growing family. What drew us to our current community was the character we could not only see in the homes, but we could feel on the streets and through the people we met. We were surrounded by heritage homes with people who wanted to preserve the look and feel of their community. We found our forever home and started to make it our own by doing some renovations, creating a nice elevated garden in our small backyard and hanging a swing on one of our many mature trees. In chatting with the neighbors, it became apparent that this wasn't seen as our home at all, as most of the homes in the area were referred to by one of the previous family's names. We were living in a home that had a history going back to 1912. It was at that point that we realized that we were just the stewards of the home and needed to respect the incredible heritage we had inherited with our home. Like many of our neighbors, we were careful to make renovations that upgraded the home to become more sustainable but kept the original character, especially the external look and feel of the home and our small but very special backyard. Over the years, we have seen our neighbors upgrade their homes and in most cases kept with the character of the adjacent heritage homes. In fact, on our street, 19 of the 21 homes are over 100 years old and retain their original heritage charm. We have also seen a continued vibrant, diverse community with older people moving out and young families moving in, filling up our local schools and maintaining the active play of children on our boulevards that has been a consistent part of our community since it was established. This shared respect, care, and attention for the look and feel of our community, along with the protection afforded by RC1 zoning, has led us to believe that the significant investment we have made in our home is secure and that we will be able to maintain the character of our community for generations to come. A change to blanket RCG zoning flies directly in the face of what generations of our community members have done with respect to development in our neighborhood. This blanket zoning risks impacting our community with the housing forms that don't fit and take away from the natural beauty of the existing yards and landscapes. It has been said that the current zoning practices are exclusionary and were based on segregation practices that have no place in an inclusive community. Although that may be an accurate historical reference, it did not apply to the city's current zoning practices, which provide predictability and stability for homeowners for inclusive, diverse communities across Calgary. It has also been said that the new blanket zoning provides choice for homeowners. This is misleading. The only people using the choices that blanket zoning enables will be developers. This proposal puts the choice for development in the hands of developers and out of the hands of individual homeowners. This is exactly what the sort of thing that I believe the CPR wanted to avoid when it originally sold off parcels of land in Calgary. It is somewhat surprising to see how prescient the railroad was over 100 years ago to protect the community they were establishing. Many of the restrictive covenants that were originally in place by the CPR to only allow single-family homes on lots still exist today. Although I know that the city does not recognize restrictive covenants in their planning processes, many in our community are now considering reestablishing restrictive covenants for every property to protect the character of a community going forward, as it appears the city is unwilling to do that by retaining RC1 zoning. With blanket zoning, I believe we will develop into a Wild West approach to planning where no one can predict what kind of housing will be built in their neighborhood. It will be left up to the neighbors to use restrictive covenants to fight against developers in the civil court to protect our neighborhoods. This is not the approach we would want or expect from our elected officials. We have thought that the LAP process, coupled with the heritage guidelines being developed in conjunction with community members, would help us create a collaborative approach to development. We have been impressed by the professionalism, consideration, and collaboration of the city planners involved in this process, and are disappointed that all this effort will be seriously undermined by a blanket RCG rezoning approach. I hope that the Mayor and Council will consider all the inputs they have received from this public hearing, previous sessions, from the media, from social networking sites, from many community associations, from leading Calgarians and everyday citizens. That said, I remain skeptical that this public hearing will have any effect on what appears to me to be a predetermined outcome to approve blanket zoning. Based on all the feedback you have received, I still hope that you consider taking a step back from moving ahead with the divisive one-size-fits-all solution of blanket zoning. Please consider policies that, in words of one of our community leaders, build where it makes sense and would allow us to protect the integrity and character of our wonderful Calgary communities that we all love so dearly. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to John Chandler, please.
Good morning. There were two pictures that I had sent in. Are they available, or?
We will just pull them up right now.
Can I have the other one first? Thank you. Black, blue, and green bins could be as many as 27 bins in the alley. Where do you propose to store these bins? In the alley. I realize that the city requires the bins to be in a secure, fenced enclosure. That works on day one. After that, does the city have enough bylaw officers to ensure that the alley is not being used? My experience with the city says no. City of Calgary solution to parking. We take steps to ensure that there is enough parking by managing the space with permit parking, time restricting parking, and paid parking. The city hasn't got a clue how to magically create more parking. They just pass the buck down to the residents and have lived there for the last 50 years with no parking problems. This will be an unbelievable disaster. I can hardly wait till I have to park a block away or pay for a new parking tax. I have 3 going on to 4 fake garage suites within 100 meters of me. The cars are all parked in the alley. This is without a fourplex. Imagine the disaster when the fourplex comes. What happens to the electric vehicles when they need to be charged? If I understand correctly, if a garage suite is approved and constructed with the correct permits and inspections, it will not and cannot be inspected again without invitation by the owner. So once the final inspection is completed, the owner can do whatever they want with the garage. This includes the possibility of turning the vehicle garage part into another suite. I believe that this is happening frequently. I refer to this as pretend garage suites. I have been watching 2 side-by-side garage suites for some time. There has never been any indication by mud or snow that a single vehicle has ever entered these garages. 4 vehicles are constantly parked in front of the doors. I propose that the city include a requirement that garage suites have a permanent permission clause for unannounced inspections by the city to confirm that the garage actually is still a garage. The carpet rezoning proposal, in my opinion, is a farce, a smokescreen, and a diversion. The truth is that there never be 4plexes built in the ritzier districts. Mount Royal is registered as a CG, now it's a DC, direct control. Not sure what that means. What about those with no back alleys or no narrow lots or 0 clearance lots? How about the 5 lake communities like Chaparral, Midnapore, Mackenzie? That leaves only the old 50-foot lots with back alleys. This is clearly an attack on the middle-class citizens of Calgary. Mayor Gondek is throwing the middle class under the bus for $228 million. Can I have the second slide, please? Well, I have a super deal for you. You can buy an old house and tear it down and build a 4plex, and you only have to supply 2 parking spaces. But if you act now, I'll throw in 4 extra secondary suites absolutely free. You're not sure that this is the deal for you? Okay. As a one-time bonus, I will add a fake garage with a suite and no need for extra parking. It comes with a large balcony, as you can see, allowing you to watch your neighbors in their backyards. Best yet, it comes with a new set of binoculars. Mayor Gondek talked about misinformation. I ask you on Friday of last week, you were interviewed on CTV, and you made a statement that basically said not linked money to this. Then on Saturday, Calgary Herald comes out, and I acknowledge that the federal funding is partially contingent on it. Which is it, partially or not at all? It is quite obvious that Mayor Gondek and certain councillors have been so wrapped up in pursuing their agendas for rezoning that they have forgotten to listen and represent the citizens of Calgary that elected them. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Spencer Howard, please.
Good morning, Mayor Gondek, councillors. I am not opposed to affordable housing nor change. I am opposed to this, though, because I've heard many people far wiser than me state that this will not achieve that specific goal. In far too many neighborhoods in Calgary, implementing this zoning change will only make developers, property speculators, and landlords wealthy. You must selectively determine where it will achieve your intended goals. Use the land the city already owns, like Curry, Ernest Manning. Rezone major arteries, absolutely. Our community was told during the meeting that you could fit 7 Vancouvers into Calgary, proving that there is already more than enough land in all directions. I've lived in Calgary for over 60 years, and in the past few days, I've monitored this hearing and heard plenty on both sides of this controversial decision you have to make, and you're in a tight spot. You can't please everyone, so who will you choose to please? 20% or so of Calgary's population can't afford housing. I've heard many people express their dismay over what they claim is a right. Essentially, they are entitled to housing. Well, I have news for you. No one is entitled to anything in this world. Everything must be paid for or earned in one way or another. Taking children under 14 out of the equation, a quick analysis of readily available statistics can be boiled down to that 20% being a little less than half of people under 40. So at what age should a family be able to acquire a home, whether it's a condo, townhouse, duplex, single family? My father was a professional engineer in the petroleum industry and financially successful, but that didn't happen overnight. And he was 40 before my family was able to buy a home of any kind, prior to which they rented. And that was in the late 1950s. Then they bought a modest bungalow. Over time, They worked hard and could afford more, and they upgraded. Their long-term goal, as I presume applies to many, was to slowly evolve into what they considered their ideal neighborhood, RC1. I live in that home today. It's been my ideal neighborhood for decades. Soon, based on your decision, my RC1 may not exist, nor will it for anyone with those same goals. Everyone who has already met that goal through their hard work and patience may have their achievements stripped away from them. By any measure, that would be a gross violation of a long-standing contractual agreement and obligation to so many residents. You owe it to the long-time citizens of this city to not betray us. I wonder what a company considering a move to Calgary would think about a city council that changes the conditions of a long-standing agreement with its own constituents. It's akin to changing a warranty after a purchase. These are quotes from Tuesday's hearing. More homes is more important than parking. That opinion was actually expressed by someone who doesn't drive. I can't imagine how I could live in Calgary if I wasn't living with my parents. That was a very well-educated 17-year-old who said that, but how many 17-year-olds don't live at home with their parents? City Council should think less about people who own homes and more about people who need homes. Do you think less about the people who have invested in their homes, their dreams, their neighborhoods, and in this city? Ms. Poshman said that her research shows that communities want active engagement, not just being informed. Bob Merchant said that his research indicates using the affordability argument to support this rezoning simply isn't true. Another speaker said they were tired of council doing things to us rather than for us. During my working years, I spent a long time in the field of aviation where, prior to every intended flight, a go, no-go decision had to be made based on many factors from weather to human to aircraft. If all those factors add up to a yes, that was a go. If they added up to a no, that was a no-go. If they equaled a maybe, that was a no-go. Ladies and gentlemen, based on the tremendous opposition you're hearing to this proposal, this clearly is a maybe at best, and therefore it simply must be a no-go. I implore you, do not adopt citywide rezoning. Please try again to find another plan or combination of plans to achieve these worthwhile goals. Passions may be high, but you can surely see that we all want to help find solutions. This just isn't it. If opinions on this matter are a perfect 50-50 split, you can please only half of us by deciding now. Surely with more consideration, a better ratio can be achieved. Table this vote. You will ensure the city's future and possibly yours as well. But as a final resort, I'm going to invoke my secret weapon, a magic word that my mother taught me. Please, council, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Please hang on the line on mute in case there's any questions for you. Let's go to the first question. It's from Councillor Chabot.
My question for Mr. Chandler. Mr. Chandler, you raised some very interesting points. First question I'll ask you is a question I've asked others because you weren't clear. Did you receive a letter from the City of Calgary saying your property is about to be rezoned?
First of all, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry. Maybe I'll speak closer to the mic.
Hearing aids.
Yes. So my question was, did you receive a letter from the City of Calgary saying your property and the neighboring property was about to be rezoned?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Do you?
And I look at everything.
Are you a property owner?
I am.
Okay. So you should have received a letter from the City of Calgary.
I don't recall.
Okay, no problem. You raised some questions about the garages. Now, are you talking about the garage themselves being used as a suite?
Mm-hmm. Very likely. Why would you have cars parked in front? 4 cars, as you can see in the picture, parked in front of the doors. And I've checked like when we had snow going down, the snow was never touched going into the garages. So they could be empty, and I admit that, and I'm just throwing it out that it's a possibility that yes, these garages are now another suite. They could easily be turned into it.
Or they could be used for storage.
They could be used for storage, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So part of your argument is that the on-site parking isn't being satisfied by virtue of the fact that they're not being used for the automobiles, which is what their intended use was.
Yeah, not at all. No, there's not that at all. And quite honestly, to add to it, there's a fellow just down, like 2 houses down, parks his big limo in the alleyway as well. So you sort of have to go like this to go down the alleyway when you're going down there. I think you could probably get a fire truck down there, but it would have to do some dodging of cars in the process.
Yeah, these are kind of questions that we'll have to get clarification from administration as far as bylaw infractions as it relates to land use matters on property, specifically by having the requirement to provide a certain number of parking stalls on site, depending on how many units you have. So the enforcement of that is subject to another discussion, but certainly a question we can ask administration following the public hearing. Thank you for your submission, though.
That would be what my thing is as well. Is there's no enough bylaw officers out there to supervise this thing once we get it going. It's just going to be schmoz.
Right.
Anyway.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. That's it for the questions for this panel. So thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your time. We're going to move on to the next panel. This one is panel 55. Do we have Quinn Morley? Hi, you can come up and grab a seat. Do we have Nicole Larger? Hi, please come on up. Do we have Tom Dvorak? Hi, please come on up. Do we have Matt Saborin? Hi, please come up. And Frank Johnston. Hi. So our 5 panelists are here. We're just going to wait for them to take a seat. The order will be Quinn, Nicole, Tom, Matt, and then Frank. So Quinn, please kick us off.
Hello, Council. Good morning. Thank you for hosting this public hearing and giving all Calgarians of all positions and opinions the ability to voice their beliefs on this proposal. It's important that all perspectives are heard, and I'm happy that they are. My name is Quinn. I'm a student at the University of Calgary, and today I would like to speak in favor of the city-wide rezoning proposal and offer my personal perspective as a Calgarian that's facing down the harsh realities of housing in this city. If I can describe my experience of housing in one word, it wouldn't be the words that were used to describe it to me when I was a child. I would use the word bleak. As I walk across the stage at graduation this spring, I'm walking into a city that seemingly does not want me here. I'm walking into the most expensive housing market in the history of this city. I'm walking into a city where housing is treated as a commodity as opposed to a necessity. I'm walking into a city where the housing I need in order to be successful in life is blanket banned almost everywhere in the city. And all this means is that what little housing actually works to give me a successful start in life is shockingly undersupplied, over demand, and as a result costs more than my entire monthly paycheck. Young people cannot survive, let alone succeed under those circumstances. Something has to change. And the way I see it, and I am far from an expert, this proposal will help. It will help affordability by helping meet the demand for homes in the city. It will help housing adequacy by allowing the types of homes that Calgarians need in order to succeed and survive to be built. It will help Calgary's sustainability goals by allowing growth without sprawl. It will help entrench the right of all Calgarians to not only own a home, but do with that home what they please without government interference. And it will help the city be fiscally responsible by allowing and facilitating the construction of homes that actually contribute more in taxes than they take, unlike the suburbs they stand to replace. Now, this proposal is far from perfect. As stated by others, both in support and opposition, more actions will be needed in order to deliver truly impactful results. And I look forward to standing right here when those changes come up on the agenda. There have, of course, also been problems that have been raised by those in opposition. And you know what? I agree with them. We want to talk about school overcrowding like some people were talking about yesterday. I remember taking high school courses in the hallway. But I ask council to remember this, that these problems are not inherent flaws with this proposal. They are growing pains facing a growing city. And most importantly, they're problems that can be overcome. Fixing one problem is not mutually exclusive to fixing another, and we cannot afford to lose what this proposal can do by voting it down. This proposal will help build a strong foundation for action needed to end this housing crisis facing every Calgarian, young and otherwise. Because the harsh reality I and every other young Calgarian in the city faces this: if I cannot find and secure affordable and adequate housing where I want to live, I cannot live there. and I know that all too well. I stand before you a proud Calgarian. I've lived here almost all my life. My family's here, my friends are here, my job is here, my education is here, and almost everything I've ever known is here. And it's for those reasons and more that I'm proud to call this city not only among the best in the world, but also, and arguably most importantly, home. And yet, I'll be moving away this August. I cannot find and secure adequate and affordable housing, so I cannot live here. And I'm far from an exception. Young people are packing up and leaving the city at the rate of over 1,000 every other month. And in doing so, they are taking with them the knowledge, the skills, the expertise, and most importantly, the heart that will keep this city running for years to come. While citywide rezoning is not a perfect proposal, it will help. It will help young Calgarians in their hour of need when we need it most. It will help make the homes we need in order to succeed and make those homes affordable for us. And above all, it will help young Calgarians, just like me, be able to finally say, truthfully, that home is here. And so I'm asking you today to please do the right thing for every young Calgarian and vote in favor of citywide rezoning. Thank you. I'll just be sitting over there if you have any questions you'd like to raise. Thank you, and again, please vote in favor of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Nicole Larder, please.
Hello, my name is Nicole Larder. I am a fourth-year sociology student at the University of Calgary, and I am in favor of the blanket rezoning. I am 25 years old, and I still live at home, rent-free, with my parents and my two younger sisters. We live in a single detached home in Ward 13 that my parents built from the ground up in 2002, and at that time it cost $220,000 to build. The housing market has changed quite a lot since then. While I would certainly like to move out one day, I don't see that being possible anytime soon with the cost of living crisis. I have given up hope that I will ever own my own home. In my opinion, that is the dream of a bygone generation. To those who would argue with me, I ask them, how am I to save money working for $15 an hour? I know that's a lot more than minimum wage used to be, but the fact is that the cost of living has skyrocketed and wages have barely increased. According to Stats Canada, and adjusted for inflation, in 1976, minimum wage was just over $11 in Canada. Again, that is adjusted for inflation, but consider that we're at $15 now. What does that say about us and change? I'm in favor of any affordable way to get a roof over my head and my fellow Calgarians' heads. I'm additionally in favor of decreasing our urban sprawl. As someone with a chronic illness who may never be able to drive, I would hate for the city to get any bigger than it is because it is already such a pain to get across. From my house to the University of Calgary is an hour-and-a-half ride on transit. So I spend 3 hours every day on transit, 5 days out of the week. Any efforts to prevent urban sprawl are incredibly important in my opinion. I know there's been a lot of talk about property values and how the building of duplexes and such will cause property values to decrease. I know a lot of speakers have said they loved Calgary. I do too. I was born and raised here. This city is my home. What I want to know is how many other speakers can say they love the people who live in Calgary. Do they love the people they see riding the C train all day because they have nowhere else to sleep? Do they love the people they see pushing shopping carts because they have nowhere to store their belongings and they have to carry everything they need to survive our harsh winters with them? Who loves these people? Who cares for them? Why are property values more important than making sure every Calgarian has access to a roof over their head? I'd like to point out that it is specifically people who own a home or have secure housing who are upset or uncomfortable with these changes. So many of the anti-blanket rezoning arguments have come from a place of great privilege. Last night, and I'm paraphrasing, someone made the comment that young people don't have the experience of owning a home and living in it for 40 years, and therefore those people shouldn't get to tell people who do have that experience what to do or how to feel about this issue. And I thought to myself, well, of course we don't. We can't afford to live. Besides the fact I'm not even 40 years old, I'll tell you that I have lived in my current home for 22 years, and I would be fine with a duplex being built on my block because I want everyone to have a place to live. I want us all to do well. I don't know how to explain to these people that if you own your home or if you have secure housing, you've already made it. You've won. You're doing well. Are you going to tell me that some shade will destroy your housing security? Are you going to tell me that your property values dipping will cause you to be thrown out on the street? These are real problems that people are facing. Housing security, it's not a matter of, the shade you experience on your house or the bins out that you see out on your front lawn. People forget that to have a home is already an extreme privilege. Not that it should be, but that's the reality we live in. And that privilege and these people's access to secure housing should not restrict others from accessing secure housing. This is not the 1800s. We do not cater only to the opinions of people who own land. Why are we letting the feelings of people who have already made it dictate what happens to those of us who are in need? All these whataboutisms are just a distraction from the real problem, that Calgary doesn't care about its poor, its marginalized, and about its vulnerable people. Homeowners and landlords, your comfort is not as important as the right for everybody to have secure housing. Councillors, I'm sure you've heard most of, if not all, of these arguments before, and truthfully, I hope you hear them again, because these are the issues that matter. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Tom Dvorak, please.
Thank you. I'd submitted a presentation if that's available.
We're just going to bring it up.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Council, for having me. I'm speaking today as a resident of Ward 7. My goals today are to alleviate some concerns about what happens under a blanket rezoning when it's led by the city rather than by an individual landowner. And demonstrate what's actually happened under a past blanket rezoning in Calgary. So my belief is that providing Calgarians with housing choice in their land use leads to a mix of housing rather than the maximum extent of that land use. Next slide, please. I'm speaking in full support of the proposed citywide rezoning that's before you as worded. Next slide, please. So I'm claiming that we've already previously done a rezoning. So where have we done that? So using the city's open data portal, we see where RCG currently exists. It's a bit patchy. There are a few corridors where it's been done, but it's probably not a good proxy for a blanket rezoning. Next slide, please. So looking else at other districts, look at MCG, which is a bit denser than RCG, and we get a bit more coverage. Next slide, please. And we start zooming in, we start seeing what I'd call blanket coverage. So not just a linear strip or a corridor, we actually see a bit more of a blanket nature of it. Next slide, please. And really zeroing in here, so Hillhurst Sunnyside, this shaded area is about 40 whole city blocks north-south in an area that was historically RC1 or historically single family. So we can evaluate what the effects have been. I realize that the MCGs from the current land use bylaw, this area has had a denser land use district available for many decades, so we can evaluate long-term effects of upzoning. Next slide, please. And so finally, is MCG a reasonable proxy for RCG? I've realized there's a lot going in the background of these land use districts. We're within a meter of allowable height. We have the same minimum front setback requirements under the districts. So I'd say yes, and if there are any concerns about negative externalities or effects of higher density, MCG should actually amplify those negative externalities rather than mute them. So I think it's worth studying. Next slide, please. All right, so what were the results? So there's a lot of concern around there being inherently negative impacts of densification and upzoning, and it turns a whole community immediately into a dystopian hellscape. And so we've had a TV series filmed in Calgary recently that depicts just such a world. And so really the research question here is, did the set designers for this series do any work at all, or did they just go to Hillhurst Sunnyside and roll the cameras? So let's have a look. Next slide, please. So scene one, so here from left to right, we have a newer duplex next to, in the center, an original century home at 2 stories that's been maintained. And on the right, we have the newest of the structures is a single family home built under MCG. Next slide, please. Here we have a series of 2-story townhomes next with pitched roofs, next to a 3-story apartment that's actually shorter than the townhomes. And I'll note plentiful street parking. Next slide, please. Here we have some original century bungalows that have been maintained in the original state for over 100 years, next to a newer duplex, next to some 3 to 4-story walk-ups that at this point are several decades old, and again, plentiful street parking. Next slide, please. Last but not least, these are 2 of the newest structures in this community. So these are single-family homes. These landowners had the choice to build a 12-meter multi-unit building, and they chose to build single-family homes. And to the best of my knowledge, neither of these structures have a secondary suite nor a laneway suite. Next slide, please. So in summary, I believe that providing Calgarians with housing choice in their land use leads to a mix of housing rather than the maximum. And I ask all of you to support land use and housing choice citywide. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Matt Saborin, please.
Good day, Council, staff, and fellow constituents. My name is Matthew Sabrin, and I'm 20 years old. I just finished my third year of schooling at the University of Calgary, and I'm looking forward to entering my career. One of the concerns I have for my future is about when me and my girlfriend might be able to afford a place to live. Due to the current housing crisis in Calgary, I fear that we might be delayed in our ability to obtain a decent living accommodation. Financially, it might be impossible. But more concerningly, the actual housing might not be available. I love Calgary. I don't want to leave Calgary. I eventually see myself, after being able to build up enough capital in a smaller condo, townhome, or rental property, if available, being able to put a down payment on a home to start a family in. In the wake of a serious housing crisis, the city needs to look to all of its potential tools in its toolbox to address the problem. Although concerns from groups and individuals opposed to RCG zoning are certainly serious and significant, I believe that RCG zoning, if done right, will be more beneficial to Calgarians than harmful in the long run, and certainly in the short term, as it will be an avenue to help address one of the most pressing issues Calgarians face and the city faces in this moment. Some of the concerns I have heard regarding the proposed rezoning include an increased demand on the utilities, changing aesthetics of communities, and a potential decrease in property values. Before I address some of these concerns as I see them, I would like to admit to the fact that as cities grow, communities need to grow with them. In the case of Calgary, we have an abundance of single-family detached homes surrounding the downtown city center, and this sort of arrangement is not suitable for the long-term prosperity, livability, and efficiency of transportation in our city. If these communities do not develop along with the city, we will have inefficient use of land around our downtown city center. You would never see a downtown city core surrounded by suburbia and then a ring of high-density housing around the pre-existing communities. We need to allow for more flexibility and utility of land use around our downtown core. As far as utilities demand goes, the concern follows. Will an increase of density in the neighborhood not increase demand on the utilities? And if so, who will pay for these utilities to be upgraded? A valid and pressing concern, but one that I think places the focus on a potentiality rather than the fact that, as cities grow, utilities need to grow with them regardless. Perhaps by placing impact fees on new developments, developers can help fund infrastructure improvement necessitated by new development. Government funding used in this way might help as well, or perhaps an inclusion of this cost could be factored into the city's budget. In any case, with the proper plan put in place, this issue can be largely remedied while still remaining focused on the task at hand, which is addressing our housing crisis. Aesthetics of communities matter. They draw people to communities. And with prices of houses the way they are, you would at least hope that you can obtain housing in a community that is aesthetically pleasing as well. By enabling RCG zoning, communities will flourish into communities that fit the demands of their socioeconomic, geographical characteristics. Developers have an incentive to match the styling of communities if they expect to sell their homes. More important, however, is that we not conflate the significance of aesthetics with the more concerning and pressing housing crisis that we are facing. As far as property values go, some people worry about how the increased density might negatively impact their property values. I've read something online from Integer Homes about this issue and discovered something that might remedy this concern. It is that if all homes about this issue, it is that if all areas have equal RCG potential, the impact on land value would be low because now every property has the same upside, whatever it is, of the RCG zone. There is a potential for less competition among builders for land, and this will be good for new housing affordability. In any case, I hope that the information I have set forth has helped to remedy some of the concerns for RCG zoning in Calgary, and to this end, I ask that City Council considers these real, significant, yet addressable concerns in making progress towards enabling RCG zoning. I think that overall, RCG zoning has great possibilities if done right, and can help to, at the very least, act as a tool that can help pave the way to a community with more housing affordability and availability.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Frank Johnston, please.
Good morning. My name is Frank Johnston. I'm here presenting for myself and my wife. Thanks for this opportunity to be here, and especially to the 4 young people who preceded me. The previous presentations have deepened my appreciation of the issues before Council. My intention today is to underline what has been said by drawing on my experiences my family and I have had over our 34 years as residents and property owners in West Hillhurst. I'll be speaking on how the rebuilding of our community has affected its character and its effect on the housing crisis, including homelessness. The research is in. The past presentations for the last few days and the research itself makes a persuasive case that upzoning will bring benefits to the larger city. Other jurisdictions with widely varying diverse politics, such as Edmonton to the north and Montana to the south, hold this view as well. Blanket rezoning frees up entrepreneurs to respond creatively to market demand while achieving important social goals. And as I learned on Monday, upzoning could free up council to spend more time on critical strategic issues. Change is hard but essential. The construction of new housing has transformed our neighborhood. From my family's point of view, construction accounts for the biggest negative impact of redevelopment, but this impact has been transitory. The offset has been an influx of young families with a revitalized community. Local businesses have flourished, the public tree canopy has largely been maintained, and in contrast to the fears expressed by others, the value of our property has increased many multiples. Although the look of our street has changed dramatically over the years, we find the claim that the new bylaw would mean the loss of the essential character of our neighborhood to be overstated. To us, there is little difference between a row of massive single-family houses and row housing. Our community's physical character has never been fixed. It has evolved ever since the backhoes arrived to dig up cow pasture for the first bungalows. The change that does concern me is the composition of the residents. My wife and I could purchase a 50s bungalow in the 1980s, even though we earn no more than an average income. But today, we would be excluded, and so would many of our original neighbors. These are folks with less income. The single parent, the maintenance worker, the young couple, the student, and seniors like my wife and I, who might require different accommodations if we are to age in place. A greater mix of housing types would help restore a better balance of people from different walks of life and from different economic strata. We've heard many examples of homelessness and the terrible burden it places on people. I would like to stress, though, it also imposes costs on communities like West Hillhurst. And we've heard this week that allowing cheaper housing alternatives triggers a series of moves up the affordability ladder. With upzoning, I would hope that the underhoused and even people at the bottom would find safe and stable accommodation. For too long, we've accepted homelessness as part of the background to big city life. It's convenient to pretend we have no responsibility to relieve the burden of homelessness. We do it because it lets us argue in favor of preserving a residential form that no longer fits present-day realities. It's time to build optimism. Current zoning disadvantages many Calgarians and contributes to homelessness. And I would add a deep cynicism found among young Canadians. They point to those who have it made, people like me and other long-term homeowners, and our unwillingness to give young people the same chances we had to secure a promising future. As one young man said to me, "Your generation got their tree fort, and now you're pulling up the ladder." My hope is my neighbors and all Calgarians look beyond their property line and past the end of their block to see the benefits that will flow from upzoning. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. We are now going to go to questions for this panel. We'll start with Councillor Penner, please.
Thanks. I have a question for Mr. Morley.
Yes.
You talked about your plan to go somewhere else later this year. Can I ask where that somewhere else is, or where you were looking?
Yes, it's Winnipeg, Manitoba. Housing was one of the biggest factors that forced me to move out there, simply because Winnipeg has, obviously to an extent, citywide rezoning, but also other factors that help affordability, like rent control, which would be useful as well. But also another major factor is education. I'm pursuing a master's degree, funnily enough, in urban planning with a focus on land use and planning policy. Access to housing was one of the biggest factors that made me apply there, and it was also the single biggest factor which made me decide to go there.
Thanks. Well, I hope that you can come back one day and help us out.
That's the plan.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I actually have a very quick question for Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, I actually just have a simple request of your permission to borrow one of your lines. It's time to build optimism. Can I borrow that from you?
It's all yours.
Thanks so much. No further questions.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Chabot, please.
Yes, I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. Yes, you.
Yeah, Mr. Dvorak.
Sorry, Mr. Dvorak. I think I put that in the chat, but I'm not sure now. Yes, Mr. Dvorak. What I didn't get from your presentation is whether or not you're a homeowner. I assume you are.
I am, yes.
Okay, thank you. And your analysis looked predominantly at West Hillhurst, or is that
or Sunnyside?
Sunnyside, okay. Sunnyside, those properties are quite expensive. Did you do any kind of an analysis on a blanket zoning in other less affluent communities, more affordable ones?
No, so where I came at it was from looking at where has Calgary done a blanket rezoning previously,
right.
And from my cursory visual analysis, this is the one that seemed to meet a criteria of multiple blocks, north, south, and east-west.
Yeah, it would be interesting to look at some areas where it would be really economically viable to do this type of redevelopment, and what the impact it would have on those communities. But we don't have any strong evidence of that, to my knowledge. But
I don't, and I would argue that the precedence that I was able to find in Calgary's blanket rezoning history is limited to this area. And we've done RC2 much more broadly, but I think that's not what's before us as a proxy.
No. And thank you for your submission. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Councillor McLean, please.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for Mr. Morley.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for your presentation. It was super enjoyable and well articulated. I love seeing our youth being engaged in politics. I was at your age the same. And you'd mentioned how great it was that people from all stripes and beliefs could show up here at this public health hearing and have their say, right? So I agree. And I'm sure you're aware, like right now when we have public hearings, just for land use items, and people get to have their say. The administration puts their presentation forward and says, here's what we recommend. And most of those get approved because, we all want density in a lot of places. I mean, I think we can all agree. Like, there's a lot of places where it makes sense. We could have 4-plexes, 6-plexes, high rises. But every once in a while, we get some that don't go through council. Like every public hearing, we usually have a few that we don't agree on. Council says, it just doesn't make sense. We're talking mid-block. There's not enough traffic. There's too much density. Maybe it's a 4-plex or a 6-plex with basement suites and backyard suites, and there's too many on one block. The residents come and they tell us, and we listen to them. And then we agree, we say, okay, we're going to turn that down because of a public hearing. So do you not think that's kind of valuable to still continue doing that?
It absolutely is valuable, which is why public hearings are still do happen throughout other parts of the development process. Simply changing land use from one to another is only one piece of the puzzle. But it's also important to understand that, at least when it comes to developments, the rights of property owners also end at the property line. And it's important to understand that individuals have a right to do with their homes what they so choose. So it's important to balance both the input of the public and both the input of the public as well as the individual rights of Calgarians to own property and do with it as they so please. And forcing multiple layers of, for lack of any better term, bureaucracy does little more than tip the balance away from the rights of individual property owners.
So to be clear, like you'd said, there's still a public hearing after that, but if this is passed in this form, there wouldn't be a public hearing at the development process, there'd be an appeal. So that if we put out our standards that this is allowed in these areas under a development permit and it met those standards, like I've said, that some that we have turned down that have met those standards, then you really wouldn't have, in my opinion, have much success. Because it's not a public hearing, it's an appeal, and that might not be. So I'm just saying I still value it, and I think, my question is do you not think that's, you don't interrupt me.
Hold on, Councillor McLean. Totally get where you're going with the question, but if you could, instead of debating, just ask the question. That'd be
My question was still, do you not think that it's still valuable to have public hearings? Because we've had that debate and answer. I think you get where I'm coming from, and I think just to clarify that public hearing, okay, I won't clarify. We'll end it at that, and thank you for being engaged.
That's not even a question. That was a debate.
I just ended
through and through.
I did. My questions were, do you not think public hearings are valuable? That's where it started. And I also had some of the questions before that. So you may disagree, but I thank you for coming.
Yeah, then at least to answer the question,
absolutely.
It
the
is
question
important.
was posed. Please
yes.
go ahead.
Oh yeah.
It is important, which is why the appeal process does exist. And I think getting rid of that appeal process would be catastrophic and would destroy what little balance is important. So the appeal process is important, and it's important that it remains that way. But continuing to build off that doesn't necessarily help, in my view.
Great. I'm glad we were able to have this debate.
Sure. Thank you.
And there we go. We are not here to debate presenters. We're here to ask them questions. So the whole point being, council, if you have a question, that's fabulous. If you would like to just debate what you heard from the presenter, that's not what this is for. So let's go on to Councillor Wong, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morley, please. Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you and your young colleagues behind you. Many of you are in university or post-secondary and have a different perspective. But as a post-secondary, soon-to-be graduate, is your first housing choice going to have to be rental versus purchase?
It will almost certainly have to be a rental because I'm simply not able to, well, on a practical level, I'm not really sure my near minimum wage job would be able to afford a home. But it's also just a matter of being a student, and especially now that I'm nearing the end of my undergraduate and starting a graduate education, it's also very much short term, which does not condone itself to a long-term purchase. So renting is really the only feasible option for people my age, and I can speak to that personally. Of all the people my age, not a single one owns a home. Not a single one is even considering owning a home. Every single one is either living at home with their parents, like I am, or renting. And even then, given the rental markets, most of my friends are effectively using student loans as a way to pay their rents.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. The question I was asked about rental, though, is moving into different housing types, whether it be basement suites, whether it be apartments, and everything in between. What would you say the desire, probably is the best way to put it, is the next type of housing once you get out of university? Is it more, houses or condos or apartments, or what sort of rental would you think is the most desirable marketplace?
The most desirable type of rental unit is a diverse selection of rental units. For me personally, I really couldn't tell where I'll be going in a few years, because if I'm to look at the path of my parents, we moved into a townhome initially when I was living down in Colorado, when my parents were just starting off their careers, and I was brought into the world, and my sister was as well, at which point we then moved on to a different type of housing, which is a single family one, and they'll be moving on later. And my needs are going to be very different from everyone else, which is why having diversity of land uses and a diversity of housing types is so important, as opposed to making that decision by stating 2/3 of the city can only be this type, no exceptions. So a diverse selection of housing is the most desirable.
Okay, thank you. Our housing strategy that we approved in September spoke about a diverse housing marketplace, or type or choice or location, everything else as such. And this particular conversation that we're dealing with is specifically about rezoning for RCG. Do you agree that we also need to place a focus on all the other strategies in addition to the RCG ones?
I absolutely think we do. I feel that we need to. We all have a lot of work. Both council and citizen have a lot of work to ensure that our city is built for the modern day and not beholden to the past. And so much of that has to do with focusing on the wide array of strategies. But it's also important to know that passing and supporting RCG zoning is not mutually exclusive to focusing on every other one. So as I said in my speech, all those other things, I'm looking forward to speaking right here in the weeks or months when those other proposals are brought up.
I know you're talking about going and do your master's in urban planning, but in the urban planning context, we often talk about a variety of considerations, not just the built form, not just the land use, but also community design, community amenities, social demographics. Now, a lot of the people that have spoken against it are speaking in favor of those things. My backyard, my neighbor, my street, my community development. Do you believe those are valid points?
I believe they certainly are valid points, but they need to be taken in consideration in the broader context. We need to understand that a lot of the issues about things like my amenities, my schools that have been brought up, they're problems that can be fixed, and especially one thing that people have been speaking of is parking. The city's already committed to working to overcome that. They're working on shifting the modal share from automobiles to walking, biking, and public transportation. And passing this will be going alongside those issues, and those issues will be resolved. Other issues like things like the built form of the neighborhood, they're important, but again, I will come back to what I've said. The right of property owners, me and everyone else, ends at the property line, and while I may like or dislike what my neighbors are doing, that doesn't necessarily mean I should be able to tell them what they are and are not able to do. There is someone down the street from me who painted their home a fleshy salmon pink color a few years ago, and everyone in the community has a number of words to say about it that I'm not sure I'd be able to say here in council, but it's a very different story from I don't like it to they should be either forced to do something or banned from doing it altogether. And passing this is about giving people the choice to do what they want.
Yeah. I'm not sure your age, but thank you for your wisdom.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, thank you. Hi. Just two very fundamental questions here. We're talking about blanket rezoning of everybody there. But in the previous days, we've also talked about a series of efficiency changes or reduction of timelines for approvals and that. So if we were to do that, rather than rezone everything, but if we were to find different ways to speeden the time to market in terms of getting land use approvals as well as development permit approvals, thereby getting the marketplace to build faster, would that be just as effective?
It's kind of a hypothetical question. I think shortening the approval time would be good. We've heard from builders themselves that would reduce the cost of the product they offer. My concern is that it does not address the need for a greater diversity of different housing types that the RCG allows. My view would be freeing up the market from those restrictions will have a beneficial effect by mitigating price increases through providing people with more choice in terms of what they build and the kinds of units they would like to occupy.
Okay. And thank you for being in West Hillhurst.
All right, let's go to Councillor Wyness, please.
Thanks. Could I speak with Mr. Morley? Thank you. When you were looking across Canada for opportunities, what city or municipality do you think is doing a good job? I know you've said you settled in Winnipeg, but are there places that you would say are doing a good job?
It's tough because the housing crisis that we're facing is comparatively such a new thing that many cities have not had time to react. But I find, just picking specific examples, not cities necessarily. If I had to pick a city, I would say Edmonton, because their promotion of citywide rezoning to allow for diverse low-density housing, their emphasis on investing in transit-oriented development. These are all great things that the city is doing, and I can pick out other specific examples. I'd say some of the development that had happened in Vancouver alongside in their inner city to promote dense mixed land uses are fantastic. So There are bits and pieces across Canada, but there's no gold standard. And as a result, I think it's important that Calgary picks that gold standard now.
Why do you think it's a new issue?
For the last several decades, we had been effectively coasting on a variety of economic policies since the 1950s that had kept housing prices relatively low, and it didn't mean that it wasn't an issue. Might have been a bad choice of words there, but it at least meant that the average Canadian was able to stay afloat. However, we're facing now increasing housing prices, a shortage of housing, and it's starting to rear its head now than it has in previous decades.
I want to challenge you a bit on that. I'm like from a generation of in the Lower Mainland of Vancouver where people were putting curtains up, and that was in the early 2000s.
Yeah, like I said, no city is perfect, and that's why it's important that we work to find a perfect solution now.
Would it surprise you that Vancouver has such long delays in getting permits approved, that the success now is not going to play out, and that's why Squamish Nation is doing what they're doing to circumvent and get around the city of Vancouver to actually get housing units built?
It doesn't surprise me at all. Like I said, Vancouver, it's a very specific example. The rest of the city is incredibly flawed in my example, and it's why I actually turned down the University of British Columbia, largely because I couldn't actually get housing there. For those keeping track at home, I'm still 4,200 in line for housing at UBC. So, like I said, there is no real gold standard anywhere in the city, so it's a matter of that we know that this can at least work. The research has shown that it can at least work, so it's important that we keep trying to fix this problem.
Have you seen redevelopment work successfully where people are comfortable in the build process as their neighbors build around them?
I wouldn't know because my personal neighborhood has not really had any sort of redevelopment ever. However, there was some developments north of me that was exactly a high-level development, and the community was relatively accepting of it. It was up in Quarry Park. So there are examples where the community can be accepting. It's just a matter of will you listen to their input, and most importantly, are you working for the benefit of the public?
And that was what made it successful? Because my follow-up was what made that successful in your example?
I'd think so. At the end of the day, cities are lived by people, and as a result, they should be built for people. So putting the needs of people at the forefront is going to be what gets you success. And if that means finding ways to promote a diverse and affordable array of housing, that's what the city should be doing.
And so where do you think the proposal before you today is falling flat? Because you can see there's a lot of animosity about what we're putting on the floor. So you know the city's done it well in one example. How do you think we can get this one to be successful?
I think the most important thing that we can do right now is pass this law and then see where the problems go. Most of the issues that people have brought up have largely been concerns about what could happen as opposed to a tangible response of what is happening, because citywide rezoning is largely not happening in this city. So identifying where the strengths and weaknesses happen in practice will do measures. The second thing that I can also say is the city should continue pushing for a better city. We know that, for example, traffic has been an issue, so continue pushing to improve Calgary Transit and make it walkable and bikeable. We know some public utilities like schools are being overcrowded, so build more and expand them. This bill, there's no way it could conceivably be a perfect silver bullet that is able to fix every single problem. That's why City Council is able to pass multiple laws. So I'd say if there is a problem or shortcoming or an instance where this bill falls flat, either amend this one or pass a new one.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, my next is for Ms. Lodger. Sorry if I said it wrong.
Yeah, it's just larger.
Thank you. I love that you brought in an inflation calculation. I'm just wondering if you looked at the change of debt to income ratio in housing in your comparative of the 1970s to now.
I don't think so.
No.
It was just a brief analysis, so.
Okay, because it's a great start in looking at what your buying power was back in the 70s versus now. Did you go that far into that example?
No, this was a bit of a rush project. I've only been looking over the past couple of days because I just finished papers, so unfortunately it was not super in depth.
Awesome. Well, if anyone's listening and you're going to present later on, please bring that to council. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Councillor Putmans, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Johnson, please. I'm interested in your experiences through change. You talked about a few issues around Hillhurst that included construction, but you also said in passing costs on Hillhurst. And I don't know what sort of thing you're talking about there.
So the reference was the cost of homelessness to communities like
Hillhurst, Sunnyside. So social causes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if I would iterate them, we're all paying more taxes because of the broad effects of people who are homeless, policing, judiciary, dealing with encampments, those sorts of things. We have concerns with petty crimes as well. I think it's not a rational response, but I think there's a lot of people who are afraid of homeless people in the community, the people that are going down the alleyways looking for bottles. You see those kinds of costs being borne, and the, to my way of thinking, the withdrawal of, or the expression of concerns about strangers in the community who don't look like them. In the time that I've lived in West Hillhurst, I've noticed everyone's building bigger fences. When I first moved in there, the fences were 3 feet high. You could talk to your neighbors. You could see who's going down the alleyway. That's not true so much anymore.
Fascinating. So you're seeing the challenges of change, but the consequences of not changing.
Well, for me, the consequences of not changing are we'll have a continued issue with homelessness, and we'll have a growing or a continuing issue with people who are in very tentative housing situations where they're at risk of being out on the street if something goes wrong in their life, like they lose a job or there's an illness or something like that.
Any other consequences? You've gone through a list of the social issues. Are there other matters that come to mind in terms of what? The reason I'm asking these questions is we're in the middle of a change debate in a sense, and you've been obviously giving a lot of thought about how we go about it. And in your experience, are the things we should be learning and can be using today as an example for others to see what we can do, what we've done in the past, what we can do better perhaps in the future?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not sure what the question is, but it seems to me what I'm trying to contrast is the concerns people have expressed around things like garbage bins, additional parking on the street, shadowing. Those things seem to me to be inconveniences. The real burden people face when they're homeless or living in straitened housing situations are tragedies in the making, if they're not already tragedies. So I would contrast those two, between the inconvenience of construction going on around you, the way your neighborhood looks differently than it did when you first moved there, to the very serious challenges that people face who can't find good housing.
Thank you for connecting the dots for us. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Craw, please.
Yeah, just very briefly, taking a page from Councillor Penner's question to Mr. Johnson, Mr. Dvorak.
Yes.
I think your mix, not Mac slogan is bang on. Can I use it in my debate, sir?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions for this panel. So thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. I'm going to call the next panel. It is panel number 56. Do we have Peter Collins? Hi, you can come on up, sir. Do we have Kevin Beneteau? Hello, you can come and grab a seat at the front as well. Lance Dowd? How about Lynn Job?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect, thank you. What about Dennis Johnston? Dennis Johnston? Lance Dowd? Okay, we have a panel of 3, so let's proceed. It'll be Peter, Kevin, and then Lynn, but let's hang on a second and make sure the next panel knows who they are And for the next panel, which is 57, I'm not sure if we'll hit you before the lunch break, but in any case, you'll be prepared for when we reconvene. It's panel 57, Hanita Samard, Sean Clendinning, Anna Aaron, Alex Peterson, and Lerma Vitug. You'll be up as the next panel. So let's start with Peter, Kevin, and Lynn. Peter, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Peter Collins. I live in Ward 11. I'm here today to speak about statutory compliance and democratic process. If Council votes in favor of blanket upzoning, it would be doing so contrary to the public interest, contrary to the clearly expressed concerns of a substantial majority of Calgarians, and contrary to the city's enabling legislation, the Municipal Government Act. Section 617 of that Act constrains Council in planning matters. It requires that land use planning must be done, and I quote, without infringing on the rights of individuals for any public interest, except to the extent that it is necessary for the overall greater public interest. The Alberta Court of Appeal, ruling on that section of the Act, stated that it is critical to recognize the limited extent to which the overall public interest may legitimately override individual rights. The court cited the fundamental need for certainty and predictability in planning law, so that the public can have confidence that the rules governing land use will be applied fairly and equally. Blanket upzoning would remove certainty and predictability of land use, going from 1 or 2 dwellings per standard law to potentially 8 dwellings or more. It's a massive change in density and a massive change in the nature of land use enjoyment for neighboring properties. That isn't gentle density. It's the opposite of the certainty and predictability mentioned by the Court of Appeal, and would destroy public confidence that the rules governing land use are being applied fairly and equally. If passed by Council, the blanket upzoning will also remove the ability of Calgarians to challenge land use in their neighbourhood. It's unfair and contrary to the principles of your governing legislation to remove that public hearing right. It's a major infringement on the private property rights of hundreds of thousands of Calgarians. This major infringement of rights and the uncertainty and unpredictability resulting from blanket rezoning is permitted by the Municipal Government Act only if blanket upzoning is necessary for the overall greater public interest. What is that overall greater public interest? The city's stated goal is to address the housing crisis by increasing the supply of housing to help improve affordability and meet demand. Is blanket upzoning the only way to achieve that goal? Put another way, is it necessary because it's the only way? No, it's not. Many speakers and submissions identify other ways in which the city's housing goals can be achieved, including cooperative housing, development in city-owned lands, and transit-oriented development. The city's own planning report states that Calgary is also already well supplied with 22 to 31 years of planned land supply in new communities. In other words, densification via blanket upzoning in established neighbourhoods is not necessary. The city's housing goal can be achieved in other ways. If blanket upzoning isn't necessary because its stated goal can be achieved in other ways, then it fails the statutory test set by the Municipal Government Act. It's also contrary to the Municipal Development Plan, which identifies main streets, activity centres, and transit-oriented development as the targets for densification, not established neighbourhoods. And it sidelines the local area planning process in which so many communities, including mine, are involved. Blanket upzoning is a controversial issue. It's the single most substantial planning policy action ever proposed in the city's history, affecting over 300,000 households, home to over half the city's populations. This public hearing is unprecedented in both the number of speakers and written submissions. According to Livewire Calgary, 88% of the submissions oppose blanket upzoning. Media coverage is intense. Opposition is grassroots, growing, organizing, and vocal. No issue has ever mobilized Calgarians the way this issue has. It's not in the public interest to approve blanket upzoning when there is such a substantial public opposition to it. Other major and controversial issues, such as the Olympics and fluoridation, have been resolved by putting the issue to the voters. A careful and respectful council would seek voter approval for blanket upzoning, yet a majority of this council voted against just such a plebiscite. The proposed blanket upzoning is a radical proposal. It's bad policy. It won't solve the housing affordability problem, and it will be destructive of established communities. It isn't necessary. It's contrary to the fundamental planning principles in your governing legislation, and there's substantial public opposition to it. It's hard to imagine a worse policy proposal. Just say no. Don't do it. Don't approve this very bad planning proposal. Those are my comments.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Kevin Beneteau.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about this blanking rezoning issue, which I am completely against. My name is Kevin Beneteau, and I'm a very concerned citizen. I am also connected with a large group of individuals of like-minded, very concerned, and well-informed individuals. The good Lord has blessed me with the ability to critically think and question everything that is put in front of me. I have also been blessed to be able to predict certain aspects of the future. Sounds interesting, right? What I see coming is very disturbing, to say the least. The system is completely broken. Just like the healthcare system that is broken, the doctors typically focus on the symptom, not the cure. Why? There is no money in cures. Most people continually focus on the symptoms, including the city council and including many people that have come up here and actually spoke over the last few days. The real question is, what has caused this housing to become so expensive in Calgary? If you want solutions, you must first focus on what's causing the problem, not the outcome. The housing affordability issue is caused by three main things. Very simple. Supply and demand dynamics. People moving from higher price markets to Calgary. 2, massive immigration. Immigration is a good thing if the right processes are in place. However, like many other processes, the immigration process is completely broken as well. Our so-called leader of this country in Ottawa has been letting in millions of unvetted illegal immigrants into this country. Many of these people are great, but some of them have criminal backgrounds, and even some of them represent terrorist organizations. Unfortunately, many of these individuals are financially destitute and are struggling before even reaching our borders, putting tremendous stress on our infrastructure, the healthcare system, the housing systems, and degrades the overall quality of life for the rest of the citizens in this country. It's actually a war tactic, and it's a process of controlled destabilization. But the most concerning issue has been the reckless spending of politicians, endless printing of currency by central bankers, and money being created out of thin air by banks through a process called fractional reserve banking. Welcome to inflation. It's not just the fact that everything is going up in price. People talk about it all the time, but it's the fact that our purchasing power of our dollar is being eroded each and every day. The solution to the problem will never be solved by blanket rezoning. I guarantee it. The scariest thing of all, we are here today in this state not by accident. It's happened all by design, and there is a plan in place that the most common people cannot see. Remember that I said earlier that I can predict the future? This is what's going to happen, regardless of whether or not we like it or not. Inflation is at unprecedented levels, directly caused by massive levels of money printing globally. 40% of all the U.S. currency printed has been printed over the last year. So, whether you like it or not, hyperinflation is coming, folks. $2 trillion in U.S. commercial real estate is coming up for renewal this year, with interest and being exposed to interest rates that are 2 to 4 times higher than what they were previously paying. Not to mention, there's $10 trillion in U.S. treasuries are coming to the market this year, and countries no longer want to buy U.S. debt. Why? Because the United States is broke. All countries are broke, and all banks are insolvent. We are going through a global systematic banking failure, and we are seeing it in real time, and the end of the U.S. dollar's world domination. So, how does that fit in with blanket rezoning scam? And I call it a scam. How does that fit into the plan? Banks will declare a state of emergency, mark my word, and do 2 things. They're going to have a bank bail-in, which has already been passed. It's called Bill C-15, and you can thank Stephen Harper and Trudeau for that. All deposits in the bank will become the property of the bank. The banks will immediately call in their debt. Everyone with deposits to the bank will likely lose them. Anyone with a car loan or a house loan will be required to pay them back immediately. If not, their house and car will become the property of the bank. Companies such as BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, State Street will buy up these properties and banks for pennies on the dollar.
Mr. Beneteau, you're past time.
Okay.
So thank you for your presentation. If you grab a seat, if there's questions for you, I'll let you know. Thank you. All right, let's go to Lynn Job, please.
It's interesting how no one else got... What time am I at?
Mr. Beneteau, you, at 5 minutes, I let you go for another 15 seconds. Do we have Lynn Job?
Can I just conclude?
Yeah.
No, you can't.
Here.
Please go ahead, Ms. Job.
Thank you, Mayor Gondek and councillors. My name is Lynn Job, and I'm representing myself, though until recently I was the president of a community association, so I come with that experience. With many years of community service behind me, for the greater good is a phrase or a principle that I strongly believe in. I live in Ward 13 in the deep south of the city, 25 minutes or more from downtown. Our community has seen a significant transition over the past few years, decade plus, due to the transit-oriented development and a giant infill project, the development of our golf course. According to city estimates, between 2014 and 2042, our community will grow by 260%. We feel we're doing our part. When I moved here in 2001, our community was made up of only single-family homes. Now, if you visit, you'll see a large number of condos, row homes, and some commercial spaces. Under construction is a seniors residence, 2 large daycare facilities are coming, and it's all serving to make our community more vibrant and interesting. And the Community Association is working to knit these new residents into the fabric of our community. We are doing our part. Calgary does not need to increase the housing, Calgary does need to increase the housing supply as well as affordable housing, but I don't feel that means densification is required on almost every street. I've been told by planning consultants that a foundational principle of good planning is building the right structures in the right places. And I'm okay with building the row homes and condos in our TOD zone and nearby fulfills that principle of good planning. And I'm okay with basement suites and all the lane homes that will be coming in the build out of the golf course. That makes sense. However, allowing 3-story row homes, multiple row homes on lots mid-block and on the corners, deep in our suburban community and farther from transportation connectors doesn't make sense. You've already heard many submissions about why blanket rezoning is not supported by most established single-family communities, so I don't need to remind you about the concerns around shading of my solar panels, privacy, lot coverage, tree canopy, parking, and. Council has heard from many social justice arguments, and these should not be ignored. I trust the city will take care of those matters by more effective tools in the housing strategy and outside the strategy. Blanket rezoning alone will never solve our equity issues. My husband and I have lived in high-density housing in Europe. It was fine, but that's not what I want at this stage of my life. Choice and variety are important. I bought into what I thought was a stable housing situation, and now I live in fear. The oversized lot behind us will soon have 6 single-family homes squeezed in. It's real for us. Many neighborhoods and districts have distinct characters. This diversity is what makes our city interesting and attractive. Due to time, I'm just going to give you some quick bullet points to wrap up. To increase the housing supply, I support targeted rezoning. By the way, TOD has been around since the 70s or before. Why isn't it happening in every TOD zone in Calgary? Number 2, to relieve the heavy burden on the planning department and council, please explore process improvement. Number 3, my councillor has been quite good at remaining amenable to persuasion. Many other councillors have stepped way over the line, in my opinion. Has that been noted? Will they be sanctioned? Number 4, please work with and respect our community associations and the Federation of Calgary Communities. We're building neighborliness, belonging, and community pride. Our communities love us. Why don't you? Number 5, trust in the city has been seriously eroded by a lack of transparency and by the inauthentic engagement process through the rollout. Number 6, residents in my community wanted the opportunity to hear a presentation and then ask questions. They wanted their feedback to be collected and to discuss the issues together as a community, not through a charade of engagement like we see at the city's typical sessions. Thankfully, we were able to attend the town hall meeting with Councillor Demong. Lastly, in summary, this issue is not black and white. This is not an all or none discussion, and I ask you to please take a more nuanced approach for the greater good. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And let me just see, do we have Lance Dowd on the line? Do we have Dennis Johnston? Okay, that's it for this panel. We have questions. Let's start with Councillor Chabot, please.
Mr. Collins, thank you for your submission this morning. Essentially, what I believe you were saying is that our rights as citizens and property owners don't necessarily end at our property line. Is that sort of what you were implying?
Well, I suppose to some degree when I said that the massive increase in density affects private property enjoyment, part of the enjoyment of private property, and it's a common law principle, goes back many centuries, for example, is solarium, the right to light. So if people on neighboring properties construct anything that deprives you of your right to light, there's a common law remedy, has been for centuries. There's the tort of nuisance, a private tort that says that noise and smells, odors, emissions, vibrations, things like that from neighboring properties cannot affect your private property rights, and if they do, there are injunctions that can be obtained to stop them and damages paid for the negative consequences. So, you know, those are two examples. I could give more, but...
No, that's fine. What's your position on, so far as the city initiated a blanket rezoning as it relates to individual properties, owners' rights as far as their own property?
Well, my concern there is that a public hearing to speak to the particular effects of the zoning change is being removed if there's a blanket upzoning. I mean, in reality, what City Council, or the proposal before City Council today proposes is over 300,000 rezoning applications where everyone is going to be affected potentially by built form up to 3 stories high, potentially I'm at least 8 dwelling units where there may have been 1 before, and then we have carriage homes, you know, the laneway suites, maybe 9. I've heard some suggestions it'll allow up to 12 on a standard city lot. People will want to be able to turn up and speak to that, even not knowing the resulting built form. They know the potential maximum built form and they would like to speak to it. This blanket upzoning removes their right to be able to speak to that major change to neighboring properties and the resulting change to their own property.
Okay, I know that part of the recommendations is to reintroduce RC1 as a use, as a permitted use under RCG. Is that something that you think is important?
Well, yes. I think the existing uses, RC1 in the RC1 neighborhoods, RC1 and 2 in the neighborhoods already zoned that way, should automatically be permitted uses. Really, all you're doing is grandfathering the existing zoning. So, on that particular point, yes.
Otherwise, we could be creating a whole bunch of legal non-conforming uses.
Well, I suppose going forward, correct.
Okay. Yeah, no, those are all my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Putmans, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Collins. If I may ask you a question. Thank you. You said where to put density in context of discussion where along a main street or other such areas weren't in your mind an ideal place to be. But you mentioned established areas. Could you give more detail about where density should go in established areas?
Well, as it happens, I'm our community association rep on the Chinook Communities Local Area Plan, and in that planning process, they're following the principles set out in the Municipal Development Plan, which does focus higher density development along the main streets, the activity centers, the transit nodes. That's where it should be. That's where it makes sense to do it. And this, the supply goals, the densification goals can be achieved, focusing the density in those areas and minimizing the disruption to the core of the neighborhoods. And also the Municipal Development Plan recognizes that intensification should be done with as little disruption to the stability and the nature of the existing established neighborhoods.
What does that mean? Too much? I'm not sure I understood what your last sentence was.
Well,
could you explain that, please?
If RCG passes, it is going to permit major densification everywhere, randomly selected in all neighborhoods, rather than tapering the densification toward the activity centers, the main streets, the transit corridors, and then it doesn't allow for a sloping down and preservation of the existing lower density cores of the established neighborhoods. I'm not sure if I'm answering
yeah,
your
okay,
question
that
correctly.
helps. Thank you. Change of topic. You mentioned neighbors or property owners' authority to or access to feedback or input on the development as it proceeds. Were you aware that there is the opportunity to permit at the level of development permit?
Well, yes, I appreciate that there's an opportunity to provide feedback in response to a development permit. If it's a permitted use, it's pretty much automatic. And to be clear, the input in response to a development permit is technical planning input on a built form. It doesn't address the broader issues of the land use. Talking to a planner is a vastly different thing than the right to a public hearing in front of council to deal with the broad issue of all potential land use on the property.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wong, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Collins, sorry, thank you. Often the public's invited to speak about municipal development plans and speak about ARPs and local area plans, and that's to get their perspective on the evolution or the development of a community or neighborhood or block. In the case here, we're talking about the rezoning of properties, and in the rezoning, we asked specifically about that site. In the absence, because blanket rezoning will affect across the entire city, in the absence of a recent MDP, ARP, or LAP conversation, is it important to have public hearing on the land use change?
In the absence of any recent plan for the orderly development of a neighborhood, yes, there should be a public hearing. I don't think that takes away from the need for public hearings for changes to existing plans, whether it's an area structure plan, area redevelopment plan, or even an approved local area plan. If there's a change in zoning proposed after those plans have been passed, it's not only a change in zoning, it's a change to a neighborhood or a regional plan. There should definitely be a public hearing.
So on that last point about discussion of that zoning as it relates to changes to the neighborhood, that change to the neighborhood is a valid consideration or argument?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's it for the questions for this panel. Thank you very much for joining us today. You can go and grab your seats, and if you're on the line, you can hang up now. I'm going to see how many people we have from the next panel. Do we have Hanita Samard? What about Sean Clendenning? Okay. Anna Aaron? Okay. Do we have Alex Peterson? Do we have Lerma Wittug? Okay, before you all get up, let me just ask council a question. I know that we have colleagues that will be going into Calgary Planning Commission at 1 o'clock. If I understand correctly, Ms. Hamilton, you think this will, probably Planning Commission will run from 1 p.m. until 3:30, 4 o'clock?
Roughly 2.5 hours if all goes well, but.
All right, so if we say tentatively resume at 4, does that give you enough time?
I believe it does.
Okay, so members of the public, here's what will be happening this afternoon. Between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m., we will be breaking from public hearing because there's a Calgary Planning Commission meeting that needs to happen today. We will resume at 4 o'clock. If something changes, please look for messaging from the clerk. We will try to put things out on social media so that you're aware of what's happening, but more than likely 4 o'clock is when we'll resume public hearing. For that reason, members of council who don't have to go to commission right away, are you comfortable staying to do one more panel? Anyone opposed to that idea? Okay, not seeing anyone opposed to it. Let's kick off with 57. So Hanita, Sean, Anna, and Lerma, you can all come and take a seat at the front here, and we'll start with Hanita Samard. And while we're getting the panel... I'm sorry, who's that? Okay, somebody needs to use their device, please. All right, Terry. Okay. All right, so when we return from the break, it's going to be panel 58. It'll be Bill Oliver, Daryl Comic, Murad Iskandarov, Brad LaForge, and Adrian George. For now, Ms. Samard, please go ahead.
Hi, I am Hanita Samard. I have lived in Kelvin Grove for 2 decades. I bought my 70s bungalow because it is on the number 3 bus route, 10 minutes from downtown, and near major arteries. I am in favor of upzoning Calgary. As I've been listening to the presentations, one thing has become crystal clear. We are failing. We are failing in 2 ways. First, we are failing young people because over and over again, we are hearing from young Calgarians who have done everything right that they can't find a home to live in. All the 20-somethings I know are either back living with their parents or living in homes owned by their parents. This is unprecedented. Second, we are failing as a city because people are prioritizing things like their privacy, their sunlight, over the basic housing needs of people who can't even hope to have privacy or their own sunlight. How can people who have homes deny housing, a basic human right, to their fellow citizens? This is appalling and embarrassing. How did we get this way? Why aren't we a city that cares for its fellow citizens, that prioritizes homes for everyone, that wants to ensure that young people and future Calgarians will be able to call Calgary home? This is selfishness, and I think it is because we have lots of privilege in this city. I also think it is because Calgary is so young. Really, Calgary is just going through puberty. Remember what a big deal things were when you were teenagers just doing things for the first time? You thought you were the first in the world to ever have those experiences. It's the same with increasing density, and it isn't a big deal. My brother lives in another country, in a home that was built in the 1700s. His much sought-after neighborhood has a whole variety of homes built over centuries. Row houses, apartments, attached homes, detached homes, and more. Not only is there a variety of homes, their neighbors are diverse, and in particular, they aren't just 1 or 2 age cohorts like in many Calgary communities. This means that schools, businesses, and services don't go through booms and busts. They're always thriving because there's lots of people with lots of needs who use their neighborhood amenities. The neighborhood has definitely not been destroyed by increased density. It has benefited from it. Nostalgia and a failure of imagination won't solve solve the housing crisis. Every city must change and grow, and Calgary is no exception. If we really care about our neighborhoods, we should support upzoning because that is how we keep our communities thriving long-term with the amenities we depend upon. I keep hearing people who are against upzoning talking about choice. I don't get it. Since when is choice just one thing? Having only single detached homes is like being told we can only eat apples, that apples are the only choice. Upzoning means actual choice, not just apples, not just fruit, but maybe even vegetables or nuts or beverages. If we really care about choice, we should support upzoning because that will actually provide Calgarians with real choices, a variety of housing options in every community at various price points. Another common argument centers around trees, that with increased density we will lose precious old trees. I'm confused by this. In the last couple of months, my neighbors have cut down 5 massive evergreen trees, each 50 years old, trees that I used to see out of my windows every day. Some of the loudest voices against upzoning are from my neighborhood, and I haven't heard any of them speak up for these trees. The trees aren't being taken down because of increasing density, but they are on lots of single detached homes that are being renovated. So it's fine to take down trees if they're on single detached homes, but not if they're attached. If we really care about trees and the environment, then we should support upzoning, as increasing density is the best way to decrease our impact on the environment and address the worsening climate crisis. Almost everyone has said something about affordable housing, even if they don't know what it means. Too often this concern for affordable homes doesn't come from genuine concern for the lack of affordable housing, but as a reason not to change an existing community. If we really care about affordability, then we should support upzoning and push for homes at various price points in every community so that every Calgarian can afford to live here. All these arguments and more are just delay tactics. We can't preserve our city in amber. Let's stop failing. We need more homes. We need affordable homes. We need homes that are built for the future. We need better public transportation. What kind of city do we want Calgary to be? We have to unlock its potential. We have to take care of people. We have to get them out of their parents' basements. Let's prioritize people. Let's grow up and make sure every Calgarian has a place to live.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Sean Clendenning.
Hello, Mayor and City Councillors. I'm Sean Clendenning, Ward 8 resident and Chair for Strong Towns Calgary. I come before you today to express our steadfast support for the implementation of RCG and RG as foundational residential zones in our land use bylaw. With nearly 800 members backing us, our organization is committed to fostering a more interconnected and financially resilient Calgary, where every neighborhood thrives sustainably and equitably. The rezoning initiative proposed represents a crucial initial step towards embracing incremental housing, a principle essential for building a stronger Calgary. Incremental housing grants communities the right to evolve gradually. This has historically been the cornerstone of successful urban development worldwide. This approach allows communities to manage growing demand while preserving the unique character and organically addressing residents' needs. At the heart of our advocacy lies the conviction that no community should face abrupt or unwelcome transformations, yet progress is unavoidable. By implementing citywide rezoning, we can spread the benefits of incremental development and mitigating the negative impacts of overextension. This approach allows homeowners to expand their properties as needed and offers municipalities a stable tax base to support essential services and infrastructures. Due to rising rents, mortgages, and property taxes, we understand the challenges many Calgarians face, especially low-income families, renters, and newcomers. The analysis at Strong Towns has long anticipated these issues, highlighting the inherent conflict between housing policy and investor returns. However, we firmly believe we can achieve economic growth and social responsibility through innovative strategies like incremental housing. Calgary's current strategy of annexing undeveloped lands is unsustainable, leading to endless new infrastructure costs. Citywide rezoning is the key to fostering economic growth without escalating liabilities while providing housing where it's needed. Calgary is currently going through what is being dubbed the donut of decline, which underscores the urgency of revitalizing established communities to unlock their full potential and support local businesses and infrastructure upgrades. We urge the city to endorse this rezoning initiative, laying the groundwork for a resilient and thriving Calgary. This effort is not just about densifying housing options, but about shaping the city that meets the needs of all its residents, now and in the future. While the proposal won't solely solve housing challenges, it represents a step forward, a breath for the city. In the words of Daniel Herringes, a housing expert and co-author of Escaping the Housing Trap, incrementalism entails a bias towards quick action over exhaustive planning. You take the next easiest action to address the immediate situation you're facing, and you take it now. Introducing RCG and RG as the base residential zones is the next logical step for City Council to take to unlock our city's full potential. I appreciate the city's efforts to facilitate discussions on this crucial matter. Additionally, I want to express gratitude to all individuals who have actively participated in this initiative by voicing their opinions, whether in agreement or disagreement with the proposed rezoning. Your contributions have enriched our discussions and have helped me personally consider a broader range of perspectives. Subject to questions, this is the end of my submissions. Thank you, Council.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to Anna Aaron, please.
Do you have my material for? Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Aaron, and I am a resident of the Southwest Community, Ward 6, and I represent myself and my family. I have lived in Calgary for almost 30 years. It is an honor and privilege to be here, and I'm really grateful to have my voice heard. I'm here to speak in strong support of the amendment of the land use bylaw. The implementation of the new Calgary strategy will transform countless lives. The housing crisis in Calgary has reached a critical point. Therefore, rezoning for housing is not merely an option. It is an imperative, a must, and a blessing. A bit about my story. Please show the photo. I live in the Southwest in an established and quiet area with low density and very large lots that contain semi-detached houses such as mine. For example, our lot is 543 square meters and an extra deep lot for 53 meters with a huge pie-shaped backyard facing outwards with an alley at the back. There is also a park and a soccer field on the hill. It is a perfect location for a backyard suite and would not impede on any of surrounding properties. Before starting the backyard secondary suite process, I went to City Hall and discussed it with many staff. I was told that I might need land use redesignation from RC2 to RCG, but most of the staff said the opposite, I don't need. Last year, when I went to apply for DP, because I was told I did not need a redesignation process since there would be many changes made. Then a few days later, I was told I need it, but I was advised to wait until September for better news. Now it is April 24. Conflicting advice and guidance from the development department mixed with long delays in waiting for answers has caused lots of time, confusion, and stress. I believe it is essential to have clear and established rules. For my story, to have a secondary suite is a milestone for our lives and my immigrant family with 4 children. Our intention has been and remains to build this suite for our son, who is grappling with medical challenges and is financially supported by AISH. Living on AISH, due to the rent prices increasing in Calgary, he had no choice with his allowance but to live in uncomfortable rent situations. Imagine how heartbreaking this is for me as his mom. Sad to say, but I'm sure he is not the only one in this situation. He could be close to us in a safe and clean place as opposed to his current conditions. In terms of population density, our neighborhood is very low density. For example, 1 or 2 people on each property in my area. Some have too much and some have nothing. Without our help, my son could be homeless. In our case, a backyard suite plan, how it's done, would not cause any traffic or population congestion. I am not a developer interested in real estate. I am simply trying to help my family and my unfortunate son and have a life. These changes for rezoning for housing will have multiple benefits for thousands of Calgarians of all ages, young and old. How many lives will be improved, will have a warm roof over their head, and could potentially be safe from homelessness? How many people can keep their family close through intergenerational living arrangement for vulnerable population, in-laws, young adults and students, and so many more? The benefits and ripple effort of this initiative are boundless. Calgarians should not be afraid of changes. Many immigrants can relate to see how privileged we are here to have such large spaces of land. This city has evolved. Change is needed as well. This could lay the foundation for a more equitable and inclusive society. In closing, I implore you to hear my message to you today, and I hope this day will be a victory for many of us. I have also spoken on behalf of individuals who might feel like they do not have a voice and are vulnerable to those who are not willing to share.
Ms. Aaron,
Thank you, Mayor Gondex, and esteemed members of the City Council for your time.
Appreciate it. Let's go to Alex Peterson, please.
Hello. Good afternoon, Your Worship and esteemed councillors. My name is Alex Peterson, I am fully in support of RCG rezoning and the recommendations made by the Housing and Affordability Task Force. I'm asking this council to share in that support. I'm a professional in the technology industry, and I'm an entrepreneur and a small business owner. I'm a lifelong Calgarian and a proud Albertan. I have been renting for the past 15 years with my partner, and in that time, we've been fortunate to find a good home. Presently, I'm living in Ward 8 in a small apartment unit located in a tall building containing hundreds of similar units. I found that life in higher density is quite good overall, but there are some notable downsides. Living on a high floor affords good views of the neighborhood, and having a balcony gives access to fresh air and natural light. But I do not have a direct entrance into my unit, which makes it less convenient to use my bike as often as I would like. Most of the other tenants are courteous, but sometimes common spaces are left messy, like our common laundry area that I must use as my own unit is too small for having its own machines. I'd like to find a place which is better sized for my needs, one I can own, and a place where I can set down more permanent roots. I've considered different lower density options. Detached houses require additional land upkeep and usually provide much more space than our small family needs, which is not ideal. A row house, on the other hand, fits the bill, providing the right amount of space, a private entrance, and a small community-oriented scale which doesn't feel isolated like living in a tall tower. There's presently a massive demand for smaller homes and homes in different layouts and styles. Our current restrictive zoning environment has supported only a trickle of new supply into the market, which has kept housing costs high. I found it challenging to find suitable housing because there are few affordable options. Stories of infills and redeveloped units selling for even more than the original house on that property are unfortunately true and are a symptom of a broken system where supply is not able to keep up with demand. RCG zoning will alleviate our city's housing crunch by allowing the market to fill up the pent demand, which has been growing for decades. But should we apply this as blanket rezoning across our city? The reality is we already have a blanket zone, which is called R1. It covers more than 60% of our residential properties. In the early and mid-20th century, R1 blanket zoning strategy was touted as a solution to all of our housing needs. But the evidence hasn't shown that this has worked as expected. Unfettered greenfield development has been shown to be unsustainable as well from a land use and transportation perspective. Adjusting residential zoning to RCG allows for more flexibility of use and hands property rights back to homeowners, embracing deregulation versus protectionism. It's a step to help correct for a broken system. RCG zoning will provide more affordable options and drive down the expense for housing. For example, The increased housing supply will see redevelopments offered at a much more affordable purchase price, nullifying the argument that infills are only luxury units. This is simple economics of supply and demand. Increased supply also increases the vacancy rate, which allows families more choice where they want to live. This puts homes of all sizes and shapes back on the market, as when one family moves out and into another place, provides more choice for others looking to either upsize or downsize. Should we be focusing our efforts to increase transit-oriented development? Yes. TOD is an important part of the housing conversation, which cannot be ignored, and we should be advocating for this. But can TOD be a solution instead of RCG rezoning? No. These two solutions are targeted to provide different options for different types of residents. TOD aims to provide concentrated, high-density living around transit-accessible areas, whereas RCG is focused on providing low-density options to those who have different needs. TOD, for example, would not provide the type of housing that I am looking for. Will RCG zoning alone fix our current housing crisis? No. There is no panacea. But will it support us in moving in the right direction? Yes. This is a gradual and incremental change which supports vibrant and resilient communities. That's one mechanism that we can use. Status quo simply hasn't been working for our city. Let's not pick the winners and losers in our city. We must support all residents, not just those presently owning property. I'm asking this council to support RCG rezoning as a meaningful, measured, and balanced improvement to our city. Let's build on our successes and support our communities and residents. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to questions for this panel, starting with Councillor Penner.
Thanks. Mr. Peterson, I have a question for you. And Council, I promise I'll be so quick. So I hear you tout the benefits of a true higher density living apartment form, but if I'm correct, what I hear you saying is that the only options can't be higher density or ultra low density through RC1, that we really need that middle product.
That's right, and that's the type of product that I've been seeking for the last 5 or 6 years, since I've I've gone through the phase of living in higher density, and I've seen some of the downsides of that.
5 or 6 years, that's a long time. Okay, thanks so much. I just wanted to double check. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it for the questions for this panel. So thank you very much for being here with us today. Just a reminder that we will be back at 4 o'clock and we will be starting with panel number 58. As a reminder, it'll be Bill Oliver, Daryl Comic, Murad Iskandarov, Brad LaForge, and Adrian George. Thanks everyone. We will see you at 4 o'clock.